Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to episode 24 of the Council Forcecast, part 3 of our Plagueis review. Let's get this ball rolling with the initial thoughts of the Act 3, shall we? Who's going first? Oh, wait, hang on, sorry. I'm Retty 4, that's Grey Jedi, that's Evan, that's Gensarai 1, and that's Antoine Bandelay. Okay, sorry.
Whoop.
Now we're going for initial thoughts. Connor, take it away.
Okay, well, this is really the point where the book transitions very fully into being Palpatine's story. Like, Plagueis is almost a supporting player with Palpatine kind of running the show at this point, but like we've said in our previous entries in this review, that's actually kind of a good thing, because it kind of shows Plagueis' own sort of unwitting kind of allowing Palpatine to seize the initiative, because, yeah. But, yeah. Anyone else?
Well, yeah, it works from a just a narrative perspective. If you just look at like the structure of the novel as it's structured as their relationship. At first, we're introduced to Plagueis, and we have like basically just all Plagueis stuff in the first part. But as it starts getting away from him, as his power gets away from him as the master of the rule of two, as it leans over to Sidious, we get more Sidious insight. So I think it works, on that dichotomy.
Which kind of goes for the title of this Part 3 section, why it's called Mastery. Sidious is achieving mastery, and not just in the Force, but also his plans and his position in the Sith Order. And Plagueis slowly gets shoved aside.
It's interesting that he doesn't actually get shoved aside by way of the Force power as well. It's very much a case of Sidious sees his position as a politician more prevalent in the central part of the grand scheme, because obviously it's relevant to that. And because of Plagueis' kind of steeping himself in the Force side of things, he sees him as kind of, you're not really relevant to the plan anymore by more than just physical power in the Force, which is a new thing for the Sith at that point.
It's funny too, because when he mentioned that you're no longer relevant to the plan, it's like, how did you not recognize that? Like, with all your Plagueis the Wise, how did you not? How did that not formulate in your brain that, like, hey, once we get to this position, you're no longer needed? Like, well, how did you not think that?
That's why it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
And
The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Yep. That is one little thingy I do remember being mentioned in the Book of Sith, because in Palpatine's little manifesto at the tail end, he's kind of talking about how he considered Plagueis' true talent to be his skills as a political manipulator, and saw his overemphasis on the Force as stupidity. And it's like, well, considering that overemphasis on the Force and delegating more and more authority to Palpatine to the point where you're not doing anything anymore at all, I can kind of see Palpatine's point there.
It's a valid one, considering the circumstances they're both putting themselves in by the end of this book.
He wasn't entirely wrong. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry, you first.
I was just saying that he wasn't entirely wrong when he said that Plagueis turned away from the grand plan to focus entirely on himself, because it was true. He did literally lock himself away for a period just to meditate on the Force and let Palpatine do all the actual, scheming and political work for that eventually got them to where they needed to be.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to say, actually. I like the fact that he's right in that central point. Like, the reason, it's not really the driving motivation for why he takes over. It's more a case of, as we discussed in the second part, his massive ego. But I like the fact that the reason he gave, the focus on him talking about how Plagueis had failed, like Antoine said, failed to see the reality of the situation. I like the fact that that's what we're given when he's doing it. He's presenting that argument to Plagueis as he dies, as a kind of knife in the heart, and I like the fact that it makes sense, because so often these situations don't make sense, even if it's only making sense from ego side of things again, because really would have benefited from keeping alive longer. Although I'm not keen on how it happened, as you know.
Right, yeah, I agree. We'll get to that when we get to that specific scene. But I liked what was, like you said, I liked what was being said, and like that whole sequence, which I think is what Lucino was wanting as well. Like, as a writer, he's like, oh, I really want to have this speech for Sidious, but like the way he got to there, questionable.
We're kind of talking only about like the last scene in the book. Like,
I know.
I know. All right, before we get there, so basically, part 3 is like a lead up to the Phantom Menace. Basically, like all the
it coincides with the Phantom Menace.
Yeah. Really. And at the end of it, it does coincide.
I gotta say, reading I gotta say, reading this whole thing about the lead into Phantom Menace, it kind of felt a little bit similar to reading the chapter in the Unfinished Tales book, the little compilation of Tolkien's notes for Lord of the Rings. There's one chapter in there that's called The War of the Ring, and it's basically talking about all of the stuff that Sauron was doing during the weeks and months leading up to the start of the war, and then how the Nazgul journeyed through Gondor and Rohan on their way to the Shire and all the stuff that they did. And it's kind of interesting because you're kind of getting the expose of basically the bad guy's side of the story and all of the stuff that they had to go through to make these things happen. It's not like Palpatine just gave the Trade Federation a call and said, "Hey guys, could you blockade Naboo for me?" It's like, no, he had to spend months and years moving pieces into position to make these things happen.
Yeah, it's as we said in the last review, more so in this part than any other of the book. It's about Lucino bringing his genius to bear and having the entirety of the Phantom Menace basically justified in this, like, 1/3 of the book.
Yeah.
And
why
it does
is
it
the blockade
so
there?
beautifully
Why do they
well.
have these
Like
resources? Why
every
did they
aspect
choose
of the an angle of the entire situation is covered and it just enriches it, and it's beautiful to behold. And not only the Phantom Menace, but also so much of the additional material that we have pertaining to that era. Again, more so than perhaps even the first and second third of the book, as we discussed.
I mean, the whole book is pretty much a prelude to the prequels, and everything that went down there in the Clone Wars. But this third part is more like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern sort of deal, where you get like this whole separate play that's going on at the same time as the Phantom Menace, and it's just off camera. Like so many of the scenes where the principal characters from the films are involved, but Plagueis and a droid, or Plagueis on his own, whatever, is just off camera watching what we're watching and thinking about it in a different way. And it makes me want like a companion movie that's just him going through the Phantom Menace, because it's more interesting than that story.
Oh yeah.
And even when you watch the scene of Maul and Sidious talking about, like,
Yes.
at last
Right,
we'll
yeah.
reveal ourselves, and
You're just, like,
Plagueis over there,
thinking
like,
And
the
"Hey,
back-
literally, you can imagine the camera going, and
Yeah.
seeing the hooded figure with the binoculars.
Yeah.
But even just from the story aspect, just him hearing those lines, he's like, wait a minute, what? Like, why is he talking like that? Does he not understand that he's just the assassin here? He's not actually, like, his apprentice? Like, he felt like he was overstepping. Like, even Sidious was overstepping a little bit at that point. Even though it's like, and even though that happened, it seemed like he should have done something about it, I think, at that point. It seemed like he was too aloof to not, like, actually, like, take a step and be like, hey, what's up with that? Like,
Yeah,
I heard what you said.
Obviously
the
they
To
can't
be
do
fair,
that.
in that instance,
the
he wasn't.
weirdest,
There wasn't
guys,
too much evidence
guys,
for it.
the weirdest thing I kind of took away from that sequence where Plagueis is just watching Palpatine and Maul discussing the whole Revenge of the Sith thing is that the impression I got from that is that Plagueis was more like Plagueis kind of had a inkling that Maul was going to die, or as we find out, simply be disabled in the near future. But the weirdest thing I got is that he was more concerned with Palpatine's reaction to Maul's death and the effect it would have on Palpatine. And the impression I got is that Plagueis actually seemed quite willing to accept Maul as a Sith Lord, as just a third party in their partnership. Like, he didn't... It's like, even... He was shocked that Palpatine had given Maul the Darth title and said, hey, buddy, you're now a Sith Lord. But at the same time, he didn't seem super angry about it. Like, he was puzzled, but he was like, okay, third party, whatever.
Yeah,
That's
he was
just
definitely
what
okay with him being around, which is shown in the final chapters.
Yeah,
Which I thought was kind of funny because I think there was a point where he was like, I think when Maul first fought Qui-Gon or first time, I think he was like, oh, did he die? Like, did he die or something like that? Like, he seemed like, like, oh my god, like, hey, he's a pretty good, like, assassin. Like, can he not?
Yeah, he was definitely keen to have him around as a weapon and an asset to the two, but it was never, like, said or even implied that he was happy to have a third Sith Lord. Like, he was very much a keep him under the level, keep him restrained kind of thing, which makes sense for the character and the whole ethos of the Rule of Two.
He didn't want anything there in a, as he puts it, defiance of their partnership.
Yeah, and he always says their partnership, which is just, again, the great and worst thing about Plagueis.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a. He
Well,
has an
it's great as long
interesting.
as he
He has an
didn't-
interesting viewpoint of partnership. That's
Well,
for
yeah,
sure.
that too. But
It
also
would have
the
been
fact
great
he's
if he
aiming
did
for it.
not. And even Sidious said it himself. He says, like, your biggest mistake was choosing me. Like, it could have worked with, some other people. Like, maybe if he did with
Dooku.
Dooku, like, that would be fine. But maybe if he found Dooku a little bit earlier. But So yeah, that when Sidious was killing him, he was like, "Hey, your biggest mistake was like trusting in me, giving me like this power, forcing me to kill my parents, like forcing me to do this, that." Like, you know, he just like was going on and on. It was really like having like a father.
We'll get to that more when we.
Yeah, I know.
We're starting off.
Maybe we should start with the actual events in part 3.
He went in. Well, I think the first big event was Maul's training.
Well, no. First, there's the Senate meeting.
Yes.
Very riveting. The very riveting Senate meeting, really.
Well, it is because it actually makes sense, and it's real politics at play, or real fictional politics at play, rather than just the quasi side that you see in the films.
Right.
It's each character bouncing off each other and giving the exposition for the setup of this act in a way that we kind of not enjoy, but we're seeing it through the lens of Sidious himself. So it's kind of like he's just sitting back and going, and kind of wallowing in it. And
they make reference to the. Sorry.
That's fine. Just saying. I love the way he said he napped through some of them, though. Sorry, just a side note.
Yeah. Yeah. Just imagine Palpatine just in his chair one day, just.
Yeah. When he sat and admittedly napped through many of the sessions.
Yeah.
For the exact wording, I loved it.
You know, the weird thing about this particular Senate scene is it kind of gave me a very similar vibe to the scene in A New Hope, where it's basically just all of the Imperial commanders sitting at the circular table talking about the plans and what they're going to do about it. And it's just like, a lot of this is world-building exposition, but there's also, like you were saying, it's the characters bouncing off each other, and you're actually able to find out a lot about all of the various people in this room just based on how they behave to one another and the specific points they raise. And you kind of get the same sort of thing that goes on with this particular scene. It's like you got some politicians who are naive and think that so-and-so is a good, honest person, and the other person's like, no, you were just taken in. That guy's a frickin' pirate.
Yeah, I really like that part. Bringing in a seemingly no-name senator just to have a naive statement read aloud. It's like seems pointless, but it kind of captivates the whole essence of the Senate at that point in time.
Yeah, and it's like you're learning about these people when you just listen to what they say, what points they raise. It's like you can really assess them and see what their priorities are. It's like some of these guys are just power mongers or playing the Game of Thrones, whereas others actually kind of seem like genuine, I'm a senator, I'm a public servant, I'm here to do a job. And then you got Palpatine, who's just like the
musing.
Palpatine, the immature troll. It's yeah.
It's just a reflection of reality, and it's so rare that you get someone who is moral and competent at the wheel when it comes to politics. It's like so rare. So even the good guys in the seats are either naive or overwhelmed by the massive majority of cunning, conniving schemers that kind of work the way up to their position through that. I mean, it helps that half these seats are of a species with extremely self-centered natures as well, or the ones we have the spotlight on anyway.
Yeah. The other little thingy I did like was just how they were we hear it talked about how the Republic just became so massive that it was no longer able to efficiently govern itself because there were just too many planets and so much territory. And we kind of see this talked about here when they're talking about the idea of forming a Republic military. And it's like one of the points that they raised I found really interesting was the whole idea that the only people who actually needed the protection of a Republic military were the people in the Outer Rim systems, but the only people who had the money to pay for the Republic military were the core systems who didn't want a Republic military.
Yep.
And it's
capitalism at work.
Which in turn leads to the formation of the CIS.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was even there was a little bit at the end where Naboo's victory kind of like showcase some of the Outer Rim people like, hey, we can totally make our own military and defend ourselves against people who are like blockading us. I was like, oh my god, that's such a perfect
we don't even need the paramilitary or scratch the Pan-Galactic plan. Union, we can do it ourselves. Yeah, it wasn't even hammered on that point either. It was like one paragraph. It speaks about that, and if you hadn't paid attention,
like maybe 2 sentences.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I was like, yes, because that's so powerful a point to give to the whole Naboo crisis that beforehand and before this book had no real relevance. It's beautiful.
Yeah, before it was kind of arbitrary, and
the other thing I really get from this that I've discussed with my friends at a lot in the past is the fact that when you get right down to it, the Clone Wars were inevitable. This war was going to happen. It was like World War I in Europe, like way back when. There was just so many treaties, so many alliances, so many people basically baying for blood that something was guaranteed to happen. And all the Sith did was they just came along and took something that was already going to happen and used it, sped it up, took control, made sure that all of the players were under their own direct control. But everything that was going to happen would have happened anyway. It's like this whole problem with the pan-galactic military is something that would come up anyway. And it's like eventually the outer systems would have seceded on their own and, shit would have hit the fan. And, yeah.
I feel like the argument for the pan-galactic military would definitely be a recurring thing that may eventually come to fruition, but I don't think the actual, galactic crisis of the Civil War was inevitable, because had some figures with Sith level influence come along and not tried to screw everything over and gone the other way instead, it would have been very much reparable. I mean, Valorum at one point states to Palpatine that someone can still pull it back. We're at the brink, but we can be pulled back. Dooku mentions it, I think, as well. It's just that they're not pulled back; they're pushed over the edge by the conniving bastards. I don't feel like it was at the point of this, at least for the majority of this book, where it was inevitable. Like there were enough elements at play to pull it back, and especially the Jedi. The Jedi were kind of had the Sith not been making things worse than they already were, I feel like there would have been enough to hold it at bay. Personally.
Perhaps.
I think I agree more with Connor that it was inevitable only because I think the Jedi were kind of a band-aid to the situation. Like they were going and snuffing out smaller engagements, as we've seen with the little mini battles we've seen, like the Stark Hyperspace War and the Inchori and all that. Like we've seen how they dealt with that and how they don't really stand up as well as the Republic would think they would, even though there's so many of them. And I think that eventually, like Connor said, I think it just got accelerated by the Sith, but I don't think it would have. Civil War definitely would have happened, I think, like eventually down the line. It would have taken a lot longer, I think. It wouldn't have been as soon as it happened here, but it would have gone down that way with how it's going now. Like if something changed, something changes, but.
I agree with the whole plaster analogy, but I personally think that it would have been, like I say, extended by the Jedi, and then if it did happen at the end, it wouldn't have been like Pan-Galactic. It would have been a small confederacy that would have overall initiated the need for an army, which then would have been perpetuated by both sides being one-upped by each other for God knows how long by the Sith.
Right, yeah, I can agree with that. Like, it would have been like the wars of the past. Like, if you
it would have been another larger-scale Yinzhor crisis.
Right,
or
exactly.
Stark Hyperspace War.
Less of like a whole galactic war.
Yeah, a system-wide equivalent of that rather than an entire civil war. Personally.
Yeah, I do see that point as well, because the impression I get is that a lot of the factions that did end up joining the Confederacy of Independent Systems, if they hadn't been pushed into joining, would have been perfectly happy staying independent.
Yeah,
and in fact, part of the one of my favorite little aspects of the Clone Wars that is really highlighted in a lot of stories, like say the Clone Wars Volume 4 comic anthology, is that the storyline in the comic Jedi Count Dooku has Count Dooku going to Quinlan Voss's homeworld and talking to the Guardians of Kifu. And the Guardians of Kifu basically just state outright, we're not interested in joining the Confederacy. We're just going to wait for the Republic and the Confederacy to just destroy each other and step into the void. And Dooku is like, well, that's kind of what I figured, so I'm here to kill you. Draws lightsaber. And it's like, it seems to me that right there is kind of the big purpose of the Clone Wars. It was to basically destroy any other factions that might be wanting to vie for power and take advantage of the conflict. Basically, it was the Sith kind of running damage control to make sure other people don't do what they're doing.
Well, we were talking about Zahir before this, and it's kind of that sort of argument again, at least the frame of that argument. Tear everything down so you can build everything back up again, which by and large is a terrible idea because there are trillions and trillions and trillions of people in this situation, and tearing everything they have down and building it back up is just going to cause exactly the same sort of situation as the previous one. It would have been.
That was really bad. I hear he actively knew that was going to happen. He actively vied for chaos. Like he wasn't trying to build anything back up. He was like, I want to break it down and keep it broken down. That was his thing.
Well, yeah, but I meant like bringing it down and building a new world, not necessarily straight back up into a new structure. But he wanted a new system of some kind, whether that be chaotic personal freedom or
if you frame it as chaos being a system, then yeah. But I would say he's anti-system, if anything.
Yeah, but it would have, a societal system would have still come into play. It would have been a personal, individualist society as opposed to a, more organised thing. But regard, my point was the initial breaking down and building into something new, whatever that may be, and it generally doesn't work as a principle because either you rebuild basically the same thing again over even enough time, or different factionalist elements keep everything separated, depending on the power of the initial breaker. In historical cases, anyway.
So yeah, that was a Senate meeting.
That was a Senate
And
meeting.
the second thing was them talking about Maul.
Yes,
Yeah.
we cut to Plagueis and Sidious standing together, watching a holo recording of Darth Maul training against his combat droids, observing and evaluating.
One thing I wanted to discuss during this sequence that I've been really sitting on for ages is
Right?
basically they canonized the Star Wars Tales short comic Nameless, where Darth Maul created his double-bladed lightsaber. And Darth Maul created that lightsaber specifically to combat the Jedi Master Ciolo Ermanca. And basically he unveils his completed version of the weapon in this holo recording, and Plagueis is shocked to see it. But one of the things that really brought to mind for me is that Plagueis said at the tail end of Part 2 that he didn't want Palpatine dispatching Maul against anyone until Plagueis himself had had a chance to evaluate him, and this scene right here is Plagueis evaluating Maul, but the fact that he has his double blader means that Palpatine disobeyed him and has probably been dispatching him against other targets for years prior to this scene, which,
Did he say other targets or other high-value, important targets? I can't recall. I thought it was extremely specific, high-value targets, not like a general thing.
Well,
I may be
Jedi
wrong,
Master
I
is
can't remember. That's
not
all.
exactly a low-value target.
Well, no,
say.
but I mean, like beforehand, before the situation, because it's maybe a one-off
here I
betrayal
got
kind of thing.
I got the page open. Here's a quote: "Do not speak of the Sith or our plans until he has proven himself, and do not deploy him against any of our salient enemies until I have had a chance to evaluate him."
That was it, salient. So let me just do a quick check. Most noticeable or
yeah.
important, salient. Yeah, I was checking my thing then.
Yeah.
So most notable
Yeah.
and important would be basically Plagueis' idea of super high-value
Yeah.
targets. So
Yeah, but
maybe
the
it
thing
doesn't
is
count.
that-
I'm not sure. Would he count that? Would he count Random Jedi Master in a Padawan as a...
I think so, because Ciolo Ermanca was regarded as such a ridiculously skilled Jedi martial artist that Palpatine outright stated to Maul that he was kind of apprehensive about him and considered him a threat. Like, could you imagine... It's like, what if Ciolo Ermanca had survived until the Clone Wars and had been recalled to the temple, by the Order and told to go and fight? It's like, a guy like this would be devastating. Especially if he decides, okay, this is a situation where I can't get away with this wooden stick. Time to break out the lightsaber.
Oh, God. Fear a man who uses
Never
a stick
know.
when he wields a lightsaber.
But yeah, it didn't seem like Plagueis was actually surprised by it or taken aback when he saw it. He seemed like he was more like in awe, like, oh my goodness, he like recreated
The weapon of
Exar Kun's
Exar
weapon.
Kun.
Yeah. Like that's what I took from it, is that he was just more shocked and not being like, oh, I told you not to like train him or that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Well, I know. It's clear that Palpatine did not tell him about the stuff that he did with Maul prior to this, so Plagueis doesn't realize that the Saber Staff is something that Maul created while out on a mission. So, that's the sign to me
Connor's-
that Palpatine's been quietly disobeying
Connor's-
Plagueis on this matter.
He's kind of pointing out another aspect or example of Palpatine subverting Plagueis and Plagueis still not seeing the writing on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Because he still feels that, he's under his thumb, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm just impressed that he made a Saber Staff, rather than being like, wait a minute, like that's a direct
Because-
opposition to what I told you.
Yeah, and
he doesn't know
Sidious
the
even
circumstances behind the creation of the weapon. Like, he thinks it's just like, oh, you gave this kid a saber staff, and he knows how to use it. Cool, good job. He doesn't realize the circumstances behind its creation. But
Right.
us knowing the circumstances, it's like, wait a second. This means that Palpatine disobeyed Plagueis and has been sending Maul out on missions against high-profile targets. probably for a while now, and
Yeah.
Plagueis doesn't know.
Yeah, I was going to say this isn't one of the instances where Plagueis could have
couldn't
known
be that
from
many,
that
though.
because I mean, Sidious did specifically mention to it was a case of imitating the Zabraki weapon, and he just gave him the schematics to improve on the crude design he'd made. So like, this wouldn't be one of the situations where Plagueis go, wait a second, even though there were many of those. I don't feel like this is one of them. But
Well,
I was
I think
impressed,
that-
and I like the fact that they made another reference to Kuhn, because it's another kind of shout back to the.
No, you don't. You
history of the
don't. You don't need. You don't shame Plagueis for not realizing it. It's just another aspect of the fact that he's sitting there talking to like this snake next to him, and he didn't realize it.
Oh yeah. But to be fair, Sidious was never too snaky when it came to Plagueis. He was always very deferential and very much well done, Master. You'll be known as Plagueis the Wise Master.
I
You'll be
disagree,
great."
Well,
actually.
at first, I mean,
I
maybe
disagree.
at first, but not.
But even to the tail end, I was actually surprised by how rapidly he did change in the final scene. Like I knew obviously it was coming and it was
Really?
expected to fit his
we keep
character,
going
but he
to
just kind
that
of went.
too early. But I don't want. I think we should wait to talk about that.
Let's
till
Okay.
we
yeah,
finish
let's
everything
wait.
else. But,
I think the big thing is more so that Palpatine knows how to behave around Plagueis in a manner that doesn't raise his alarm bells. It's not like
Yeah,
it's not
because-
like his scenes where he's manipulating Anakin and is very clearly saying stuff. You know what you want to do, eh? It's like with Plagueis, he's
Yeah,
like
but
keeping his.
the dynamics
keeping it on
are
the-
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in this one, in this part, that's actually what comes into play much more prominently than in the rest of the book. Is that a lot of Palpatine's insights when he's talking to Plagueis, they show us that he's observing how Plagueis is reacting to the information he's being presented with. Like it'll make mention of like how his eyes are contracting. Is it in amusement or suspicion? What's he thinking?
Yeah.
Is he like thinking about what I'm saying? Like, does he think I'm going to betray him, or is he completely blind? Like, what is it? And that'll also feed into like the final scene that we'll talk about later.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But,
We see his paranoia, but we don't so much see his planning. We don't get almost any glimpse
Don't need to,
into Sidious actually
But-
plotting. on
But it's
his end.
Palpatine. We know that he is though.
Yeah, I know, but my point is that with this, given that this is the kind of first time we get really into his back of his mind on a detailed level, we don't see much of the cogs turning against Plagueis. We just see him analysing Plagueis, not like, is this
You
an
never really
opportunity?
do.
No.
Like you never really do see it. In the
That's what I'm
entirety
saying.
of the book.
That's what I'm saying. It's like if it happens right at the end, you're
Yeah.
like, wait a second, what? It almost feels a bit discombobulating for me.
We'll get to
for me,
that
it
Jarring
when we
kind
get
of
to
does
better
make
word, rather.
sense because the impression I get is that Palpatine was kind of prepping for something like that for a while. It's just he hadn't made any active plans to take out Plagueis yet, but the idea was starting to form in his mind. And then the dark side steps in and says, "Hey, buddy, you got an opportunity." And Palpatine's like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Oh, yeah,
Well, I think actually he did have plan. He did want to take Plagueis out pretty early, but the reason why he kept him so long is because he said he needed him for the political
To learn.
scheming. Well, yeah, to learn. But at this point, he feels like he knows everything except for the midichlorian
Bring
experiments that he's
people
doing.
back to life. Yeah.
Yeah, just that. That's the one thing he feels like he needs. But yeah, he
Which
says that the
just
reason he
irks
wants to
him more.
keep. Right, exactly. Which is like, I don't want to kill you quite yet. But yeah, the reason why he did it when he did is because at that point, well, he was pretty much going to get voted into the chancellorship. So, but he needed him before that point. He knew that he needed him for that reason.
Yeah,
don't-
but again, we'll get to that when we get to the actual scene itself.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with what actually happened and how he actually him actually ending him. I just feel like we didn't see the cogs turning in that direction pretty much at all until right up to the moment, so it was kind of jarring. And also, I get that he's not as focused on the Force side at this point anyway as Plagueis, but don't you think that he might think or might place higher value on the ability to remain immortal as a secret to learn a little bit higher? Like he does, oh yeah, this one minor secret. No, that's like the biggest Sith secret anyone has ever known. Could you maybe like hold off a few years until he imparts that before murdering him? It felt like a little bit odd.
Well, he probably felt that he could unlock it himself, and we know he experimented with immortality afterwards.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. And of course, it
And I
wasn't
think
this
it's
is
like-
Tino's fault. This is locked into this path, but it's just it was always
Right,
ongoing.
exactly.
Yeah, we didn't get any
But I think
explanation
that's
for
what
that. Is what I'm saying.
It's what Connor was saying is that like, yeah, there was that one thing that he didn't want to learn, but then this thing presented itself just the same way with Plagueis. He had a time to heal his master. He's like, oh, let me just take this opportunity. He's like, oh, hey, he's kind of drunk. I mean, I'm not completely done with him. I need to learn a little bit more, but let me kill him.
We keep come back to the scene.
Yeah, can we please stop going to the scene?
We'll wait for that.
Seriously.
Well, it all.
But there were a lot of elements to go back to.
I don't want to overdo
We
it.
just-
Otherwise,
we
we'll
just-
have nothing to talk about.
Guys. It's okay to make reference to the scene. Just don't talk about any specific details in the scene until we get to the scene.
Yeah, we're just talking about
Okay.
different angles of coverage on what leads up to it. So now we've talked about the scenario it's set up. We've talked about Palpatine's ego. We've talked about his motivations or lack thereof, etc. So we'll move on to the next branch, which I'm sure will lead into the scene again. What was the next scene? Or the next significant thing after Maul's?
The next scene
they're watching
after the
the
whole
asteroids
thing-
being destroyed by
The
Sorry.
N1s.
the Naboo fighters with
Yes.
King Varuna.
That was a fun scene. I enjoyed that. It reminded
Yes,
me.
that was a scene.
It had no real relevance or similarities with besides the asteroids, but it kind of reminded me of the New Jedi Order sequence with the asteroid mining belt that they used to race through. They used to keep records of tracks for the park scores and stuff. The whole setup of looking out the viewport and seeing these ships flying through the asteroids kind of reminded me of that. Lando's operation thing. What was the one called? Can't remember. Not relevant. Anyway, it reminded me of that. But it's a cool scene. Having a kind of intro for the N1s that we see in the films.
Well, I like how the book kind of points out just how out of place they are in a world like Naboo and how, ostentatious Palpatine actually views them. Which, that's the thing. I mean, most of the Naboo citizens opposed Varuna's project for the N1s, not viewing it as necessary.
And it ends up saving them as well. So,
I know. That's the irony of it all, really.
Another thing that was just working against the Sith in the end. There's a lot of that discussion in the book, actually. Everything past the first quarter is the Sith being worked against. The Force is working against us. This thing going against us is the Force doing it. The Force is fighting back, etc. Like Matt said last time, they're very paranoid about the Force striking back, and it really does in this act repeatedly.
That almost rhymed, Callan.
Apologies. But it culminates with Anakin as well. So it's all the little nodes of fighting back lead to that brat.
That brat. Yeah, King Varuna's not a nice man, especially in this scene.
Yeah, which we get to enjoy his wonderful death at the end, which is another scene that we'll get to later. But what was anything else want to discuss? Anybody else wanted to discuss this scene, or we move on to the next one?
I mean, it just kind of sets up the fall of Varuna, and it hints at.
It's just another corrupt leader sealing his fate slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads the way for Amidala later down the road.
Yeah, I would like to talk about that whenever, but just to me, one thing I didn't see coming before I read this book is we always know that Palpatine sort of manipulated Anakin's whole life, but knowing that they also placed Padme in a position of power, it's like he laid all the pieces out for them to form a union that later is his downfall, which is just, I really like that. That was great.
Yeah. Everything is working against them in this book. Even with all of their plans succeeding, everything is going against them. Which is actually a really masterful kind of execution on Lucino's part. Not that I should be surprised because, it's Lucino, but like a lot of his threads and strings, we get to see them through the lens of the Sith and all of their plans and different plan schemes and counter plans working and together and succeeding, but also having so many, if not all of those threads going and ultimately undoing them. It was really, really good in that regard.
I think Plagueis was actually recognizing that towards the end when he realized that Anakin was the thing.
Yeah,
he's like,
wait a second.
Snap.
Wait a second.
The Force is like
he gets
fighting against
really
me right
paranoid.
now,
That's ultimately what he's undoing, really. It's the only thing
that's
that
actually
justifies
one thing that starts being talked about in the next sequence, which is basically Plagueis just walking around on the ramparts of his personal his Frankenstein's castle on Sojourn, and just reminiscing about and thinking about and speculating on the nature of the Force. And one of the things that's talked about is how this is the point where, it's like this is the point where he and Sidious, in joint meditation with one another, had basically altered the nature of the Force itself and caused the dark side to become dominant and ascendant. But then immediately after doing this, it's like Plagueis' experiments are hit by a whole bunch of really bizarre disasters. It's like a whole bunch of his subjects just randomly out of nowhere just drop dead for no reason. And it's like he's probing the Force, trying to figure out what the hell's going on, but he's getting nothing. And all he gets is just this impression, this feeling that something is very different and that time is short.
Yeah, time is short is the big thing that gets hammered in that sequence, and later ones as well. It's when he notices the big shift, and every time something happens after that, it's always this is the Force striking back. Be wary, Palpatine. Be wary. No, even I'm not being wary enough. The Force is striking back. We need to be careful. Ultimately leading to Anakin, where he then really loses it and is like, "Oh God, is this going to go well? Is this going to go well?" Drink. Yeah, it's kind of really well done dramatically from this first kind of pensive walk around his castle, which kind of sets up the end of the castle as well. Like even there, it's a kind of thematic lead-in because he's walking around, he's reminiscing, he's looking around, he's like, this is my castle. You know, this is the stuff I've done in it. It means quite a lot. And then later we get to see it fall, and how he admits that even he himself couldn't have brought an end to it. Like he was too attached to the place. And it was then the Force were acting against him, or for him this time.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how he actually actively, like, you know, how it says that he was drunk on his new power of, like, you know, manipulating midichlorians, and he's like, all right, let me see if I can, like, create something. And while doing that, he didn't necessarily create something himself. I mean, he did kind of in a way, but the Force kind of said, hey, stop that. We're going to create something for you, but it's going to be something that's going to be the antithesis of what you're trying to do, which I thought was actually kind of like a cool slight. And it's something you get more in like fairy tales and those kind of narratives. And I thought it was cool to see that here. I mean, it's not really, and it's kind of vague in the way that it's presented. It's not like a overt like fairy tale where it's like, and then this being like this god made this thing and like changed it for this lowly mortal or whatever. But I think it's a cool, when you read into it, it's a cool thing that happens, you know, with the Force striking back.
Yeah. One of the other things I do like about this segment, though, is when you really look at the way this whole thing is playing out and working, is it's kind of a reminder that the minds of we mortal beings are just too small to comprehend the full scale of the universe. Like, we cannot be God because we're too small. And it's like, when you look at what Plagueis himself is doing in his blatant quest to be God and play God and do all these things, it's like, when you compare the way the Force itself handles things, the Force itself is very subtle and has a lot of layers to what it does. It's like we're talking about how it's like all of the plans of the Sith, it's like even as they're succeeding, are working against them because the seeds of their eventual destruction are being sown. It's like the Force is playing a very subtle game. Whereas when we compare this to how Plagueis and Sidious manipulated and changed the Force, the impression I get is that it was almost a very brutish kind of action. It's like it wasn't subtle. It was just like kind of taking the Force and just wrenching it to do what they want to do. And because of that, it's like this sort of wrenching it without thinking about the consequences kind of has a whole bunch of, well, unforeseen consequences and a lot of things that they're not expecting because they're just thinking it's a simple thing, but because the Force is so tied into everything, you can't affect one thing without affecting the other.
And that's where the whole we don't have long idea comes in. Running out of time, you know, because we've done this, we've set a time clock on our own fate that we have to either beat or run out of time with.
Yeah, he's not really sure what that is right now, but he has that feeling, and that's when Anakin comes up, he starts freaking out.
Yeah, that's the alarm clock going off. He's like, oh crap.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining Plagueis just pacing back and forth on the rampart, and this scene would kind of play out with Plagueis just kind of talking to himself and rambling on and on and on about all of this stuff. It's like I kind of do the same thing when I'm drafting scripts. Like, I'm oftentimes just pacing around my room saying lines out loud because I find that that's the best way to figure out if a line sounds good is to say it out loud. And I'm just kind of picturing Plagueis doing the same thing. It's like a lot of this stuff, if you were actually watching him, would actually be dialogue and things that he's talking about, but a lot of just mumbling to himself in a nervous way. Like, the impression that if he didn't have this respirator mask, he'd probably be just chewing on his finger.
Well, I just like that for the remainder of the book beforehand, he's been like an expert manipulator, like in the moment, and very little of what he's got going on is forethought of the kind that comes from like Force visions or precognition and stuff. It's really mundane kind of expert manipulation, political manipulation, and it's only in this part that he really starts, like, the future seems to be unraveling before him in ways that he's way out of his element. That's another part. Like, he's just not primed for this at all.
Even though
Shows that
this
he's
is
not-
where
he's
we
not
see
involved.
him.
He's not just out of his element. He's out of his league, because this is essentially, as powerful as he is, Plagueis is ultimately a mortal man and nothing more. And he's trying to contend with the will of the universe.
You're right. But a Sith like Cognis would be expecting this kind of problem, and it's totally not something he ever thought he'd have to contend with at all.
I like the fact that this is the part of the book where we see him delving into the future the most. In fact, pretty much the only time we see him delving into the actual future with his mind, and yet it's also the time when we see him being least capable of seeing the future.
Yeah.
It's like Matt says, it's very much him not relying on the in the moment thinking. He's delving too much in the Force, which is his entire problem with this act of the book anyway, because he's switching to a Force perspective rather than a galactic one. He's becoming more Darth Plagueis and less Higo Damask every day.
That's true.
Partly because he was, a recluse for many years, repairing himself, but
His instincts are a little rusty.
yeah.
It's kind of interesting when you think about it, too, because it's like Plagueis and a lot of Force wielders in general achieve their greatest successes when they're just kind of letting the Force act through them rather than the other way around. Whereas this whole thing is like Plagueis himself trying to chase after the Force and assert his will over it, but it just goes silent as if in flight from him. And it's like he's just trying to close his hands over it, and they're hitting nothing. There's nothing there.
So what's next?
The next scene is when
sorry,
he
unless
actually
you want to
reveals
say anything,
himself. No, I was saying the next scene, which is him revealing himself to Gunray. Thank you. For the first time,
I love
another
the scene.
humorous scene.
Even the okay, hood up. I love that. It was just beautiful. Like, the second the holo transmission was off, hood down.
Yeah.
That to me is like my
man.
joke for like how corny the films are. It's like, has he really got like a hood just underneath his desk after he's done killing Jedi or whatever?
Yeah,
like,
and he's
real,
like, okay, everyone,
okay.
get out the shot, get out the shot. Darth Maul, come on, right there we go. Gunray. Beautiful. It was amazing. Even
But
more
it does
the,
showcase their alliance and how they came to work with each other.
Yes, which was well done.
Yeah, which was quite reluctant on Gunray's part. He was like, how am I supposed to know you're a Sith Lord? And like Sidious was like, well, I don't want to have to like show you. Like, I don't want to like choke you halfway across the universe. Like, let's actually have a partnership here. Like he at least tried to have like a legit partnership without having to like force himself upon Gunray.
Yeah, I liked how
But I
he
do
didn't
like-
even
I do
have
like
to
how the book,
choke
like-
the bird. It just threatened him, and then somehow he bought it because it's like he went, "Oh look, there's something valuable you want. I'm going to threaten it, and I won't even have to carry it out." It's like it's beautifully done. And the fact that he put the bird there in the first place is like that entire scene. He had every aspect of power in that from every angle.
One of the other little elements of this scene that kind of made me laugh just a little bit is that it's explicitly stated that this is the exact same room that he was brought to at the end of part 2 by the Grand Senator when that guy was basically lashing out at Plagueis and Palpatine. And it's like even stated that the transmission equipment that Palpatine is using to contact Newt Gunray is the same transmission equivalent that the Grand Senator had used to contact him and say, hey, I'm totally going to kill you and Plagueis. It's like Palpatine doesn't even bother. It's like, oh, there's some transmission equipment already here. I'm just going to use it. Whatever. Why waste the cash replacing this shit? I already got it. We're good.
Yeah,
I do also like how this scene outlines Palpatine's kind of inner thoughts about revealing himself as a Sith for the first time in his life, and even he's like, after he says, I'm a Sith Lord, he thinks to himself, "There, I said it, I said it." He's like,
this segment also
this feels good.
Exactly, that's what I mean. He's surprised.
This scene also has my favorite line from Palpatine. Newt Gunray asks him about the hooded cloak, and Palpatine's like, it's the clothing of my order. Gunray's like, you're a cleric? And
Do I
Sidious
look
is just
like a
like,
holy man?
do I look like a holy man? It's like, do I seem
man,
a holy
really?
man to you?
No.
Am I a holy man? Do I look like a holy man?
Would a holy man do this?
It's not my favourite line. My favourite line comes from Plagueis when he goes, cost cutting. We're talking about the hand of Pavan later.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's really like the only joke he really makes.
Yeah, but it's perfect. It's like, what? It's cost cutting. We don't need to give him the arm then kill him. But yeah, no, this entire scene was like encapsulated Palpatine and Sidious in one. Like he didn't even have to use any power. It's like, as in Palpatine fashion, he relied entirely on political or at least general manipulation. Put the bird there, threatened the bird. Didn't even have to suffocate it. Just threatened it, and Newt Gunray just bent to him immediately. And he got to reveal his whole Sithdom without using any of his powers. It was a really well done scene.
Yeah. Which is also more affecting. Like, even if you look at some of the other powers in general, like Jedi mind tricks, it's not just about dominating someone's mind. You have to say something that they kind of agree with to make it really effective. And that's what he's using here without using the Force at all. He's like, playing into other aspects rather than just like straight domination, which is, that's also like what Palpatine is known for, like he's not going to just dominate him, even though he's good. Yeah, he's going to, make some, pretty good partnerships and make some good points and make, a really good
business deal.
It's Palpatine before he's Sidious. Like, this is in terms of primary focus. This is Palpatine in his element of manipulation. Whereas when he goes to Sidious, it's all about physical, mental domination. Like, no subtlety there. But we haven't reached that transition yet. He's not the Emperor. Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's not the Emperor yet.
Like, his downfall of becoming the Emperor is kind of the same downfall that Plagueis had with being able to sustain his life.
Yeah, drunk on power.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a story older than time with the Sith.
What's that? Yeah. Oh yeah. Pretty much every downfall of the Sith is just inevitable. Even taking out the external factors of the Jedi and their opposition, they will just kill themselves.
They have done.
Yeah, they have done. Yeah, but
so next scene.
I don't remember the next scene, but where's the Dooku and Palpatine meeting?
Not yet, but that's an awesome scene.
Afterward,
okay.
But this next scene involves Plagueis talking to Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, which is cool.
Jabba the Hutt visits Plagueis' fortress, and they sit down and have a chat.
Yeah, just a casual chat between Jabba the Hutt and Plagueis.
Two horrifying evil villains. And the thing I liked about it is that it's like Jabba the Hutt enters the fortress, looks around, and he's like, I like this place. You have good
good taste.
Good taste. Yeah, you ought to visit my place on Tatooine. And we're just thinking about the Jabba's throne room, and it's like, they actually do kind of have similar hangouts.
They shop from the same catalog.
Yeah, same interior decorator. Yeah,
they like 1950s housewives comparing what they've acquired over the years.
Yeah, and they compare Jabba's slaves or servants, what do you want to call them, and Plagueis move us on. Like, what has this got to do with why I've called you here? Come on, let's get to the material. And I was like, straight to the business.
Straight to
fine.
business.
That other thing is also another thing I did enjoy. It's the fact that Jabba the Hutt respects Higo Damask. It's like Higo Damask basically just snaps at him, get to the point, and Jabba's like, okay, fine. Whereas if anyone else had done that,
if anyone else
had done that, it's like Jabba basically would have had one of his Gamorreans step up, put you in a lock, and choke the life from you. But Higo Damask could get away with it because Jabba actually respected him. And this is another one of the things I remember being talked about in the novelization of the Clone Wars movie written by Karen Travis. Like, Jabba has a lot of internal monologues where he kind of talks about how much he hates humans, yet a lot of the points he's raising are kind of valid points. And you kind of get the impression that if he stated this stuff to Plagueis would probably agree with them on a lot of those points. So it's like there are... Yeah.
Plagueis, that does get kind of ruined in the A New Hope re-releases where like they let Han Solo step on his tail. You know what I mean?
Like, you look at that. Sucks,
no ifs, ands, or buts. That scene
in
was
the EU. In the EU, Jabba's literally like criminal genius. Like, he's literally criminal genius. Like, in the films, any of the films, there's none of that.
Nope.
Not really, no.
I mean, once again, the Extended Universe makes a two-dimensional character three-dimensional. And this book, more than any other, even though it's one of the latest entries for Jabba, I mean, Jabba's had 20-plus years of development by this point in Universe. And then this one gives him even more.
Mm-hmm.
Bouncing him off Plagueis, no less, which is a really good scene.
Yeah. And he kind of subtly warns Plagueis about what King Karuna is planning to, which feeds into later material.
Yeah, and Plagueis specifically states he's an ally now. It's like, yo, you trust him this much? He's an ally. Like, he's done. Like, I've sorted him into the ally category. He's now important to us. He's not just going to be disposed of immediately.
With the stuff he does, I mean, I think the same way.
Yeah, he's very useful to them. I mean, it's why he survives the Empire.
Yeah, he gets him saved.
Yeah. You know,
And he also informs on Kamari Vosa starting
Yes.
up the Bondagore. Not starting it up, but like taking it over and saying that
Taking
there
it
is
over.
issue.
Leads into the Jango Fett game.
Which again, is just,
Right.
oh, Jango Fett game. Who needs to
And-
mention that, right? Oh, wait, no, we're going to make it a key part of why Dooku changes. Like, because why wouldn't it? It's just brilliant. Love it.
Yeah. And also
And-
before that, because the game is the first one that brought up the whole Battle of Galadron, which is like the first kind of tipping point for Dooku to be like, hey, the Jedi, I don't really see eye to eye with them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I also liked how this particular scene in the book, they raised Komari Vosa, and it was just such a perfect and graceful segue to the next scene, which is the meeting between Palpatine and Dooku. Matt?
Oh,
Yes, you
well,
want
we
to
can
take
talk
it away.
about it however we want. Well, I just like Dooku's commentary about everything because he's a villain, right? But like I agree with him a lot, like quite a lot, and just his dissatisfaction with not only the way that the leadership of the Jedi Order is handling various things. He's got like such a perfect. Like Lucino always writes him perfectly too. Like just like the words he say. Like, yeah, I can imagine Christopher Lee's voice saying this the exact same way, and the issues he takes issue with, they're like to him, he's just so above it all. It's like it's just stupid that they're all wasting their time with this. There's like his view of like precognition or prophecy. He, like to him, get that out of here. Like I don't need any of that. And he's kind of like almost like what he's the closest thing in this section of the book to what the audience is like this sort of detached sort of observer. Like he doesn't really have a dog in this fight yet. Like you're just starting to get the seeds for that. And he does a really great job of assessing the political state of the galaxy, the way that the Jedi are operating. He's kind of summarizing everything that's going on and foreshadowing everything that's about to happen later. And he has, how many conversations are there like this? There's at least two.
There's
between
3,
him and
I
Palpatine.
think.
3.
One in the
believe.
or 4, possibly. Or
There's
I'm
another
not
one
sure
he
if
has with
the third or
Plagueis
fourth
in.
that's in the epilogue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Yeah, because
On
I
Oh,
can't
yeah,
remember.
epilogue, that's right.
I can't remember which scene it is, but we kind of bounced around a little bit. But one of the there's a scene where he eventually is telling Palpatine, like, I'm kind of done, and that's later though, isn't it?
I think
Like,
it might
when
be
he's
this one
about
actually,
to-
because no, is it?
Is it this one?
Because I think in this chapter he talks about taking up his ancestral name, Count of Sereno. So I believe.
Okay.
I believe it's the
Yeah.
first part in that. In first
There's two more
conversation in Act
conversations,
3,
'cause there's another
where
one
he's
he has
like,
with
if one more
Plagueis.
death, one more
Well,
death,
that which
then I'll
came
leave.
before.
No,
Yeah.
there's another conversation he's gonna have with Plagueis later on, and then the epilogue
right.
with Sidious.
Well, in any case, the whole situation with Galadron was Dooku. I don't think that he necessarily was totally like in the right, and the council was just outright wrong. But his reasons for being outraged about that are, to me, quite relatable and understandable. And that's sort of. It sort of starts him in like this direction where he's tired of Jedi getting, and as well with the Inchori crisis, he's tired of Jedi getting killed over really petty squabbles, and the council not seeming to learn from this, or keeping the Jedi out of these sort of pettier like issues,
Or even investigating it, because if they
even
would have
investigate.
investigated just a little bit, like they would have known that it was with Galadron, it was just a Death Watch
Set up by
you
the
know.
Death Watch. Yeah.
Exactly. They were framing the Mandalorians, and if they just would have looked into that instead of just coming in and be like, "Hey, you guys are arrested. We're by the law of the Republic," it would have been fine.
Yeah, but he at the point where he's tired of watching this happen, and at the point where he's telling Sidious, I'm kind of done, and like if he has a line that says something along the lines of like he's resigning,
If one more Jedi dies.
Yeah.
because of moral equivocation on the
And
part of the
I'm
council,
out.
and at the point that he says that, the next Jedi who dies is Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so impactful. It's
Yeah.
Which
brilliant.
even earlier in that conversation, he muses about Qui-Gon Jinn and Kumari Vosa, talking about his, quote unquote
Failures as a
failures as a teacher. Yeah.
effectiveness as a teacher. Yeah.
Which,
is
at
to
least
me,
from
I
his
think makes
perspective,
sense because neither of them. It's quite shocking how different both of his apprentices were from him. Like really.
Well, to
And
be fair,
he's taught
Qui-Gon
them
was always a very
something
individual.
massively different.
Yeah, Qui-Gon was always less attached to Dooku anyway. He was more his own man from the start, whereas Kamari Vosa was more, kind of obsessed with Dooku to start with.
She's very obsessed to the point where she straight up fell. I don't think it's mentioned. I don't think it's mentioned in the novel, but she actually falls in love with him, like straight up.
It's kind of alluded to.
Yeah,
which is always odd to think about.
It actually, that's who Palpatine kind of asks, like,
it's like the young woman who became infatuated with you. I think he said something.
And he's like, yes, it was. Kind of moves on from that. Yeah. It's the later scene, but I want to mention it now because you said about how he's detached from the situation, how he feels very much above it all. I like how simultaneously detached he is, as well as being kind of overly invested, because he's got that very personal, emotional streak, right? He's like, he cares and is very, in many ways, very selfish and very, and not only like the cause, it's his cause. Kind of, there is very much an element of that in his way of thinking. But I like how you say where he's above them all, because one of the lines that stands out to me from later is when they're talking about Naboo. Plagueis is talking about Naboo, and he's like, "Oh, you're talking about this whole crisis. No, I can forgive them for Naboo. The blockade needed to be removed. But what I couldn't like is that it was all about. I forgive the Council for that. It's like, I'll allow that. It's like that's kind of encapsulates his entire thinking about how he views them. It's like he is this mind above the situation and thinking all of the different
I can forgive
options.
them. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I can forgive them that this was all right because of this and this and this. That's how he thinks. He's again, Lucina writes him so perfectly, as you said, Matt. He's detached but also invested at the same time, and it's very believable.
Yeah,
he was offered to join. Sorry.
Yeah, it was just everything that he's outraged about it. It's all very dark Jedi. Not I'm going to turn and embrace the dark side because I'm going to say he's the perfect dark Jedi. Like he's outraged about issues that affect anything that encompasses that, and even his reason for leaving the Order is more because of mismanagement in his view, not so much the light side sucks.
Yeah, I mean the Sith side of things never made sense for his character in the first place. That was always Lucas's whole mustache twirling Dooku idea.
Well, that's why he's like a nothing character. On screen. He doesn't do much for me. Yeah,
he doesn't do anything.
He's always been one of my favorite villains in the expanded universe.
Yeah, that's the big area where Star Wars: The Clone Wars really failed in how they presented Dooku, because, like you said, they turned him into another mustache twirling Sith Lord. They turned him into another raging emotional sadist. But the whole point behind Dooku is that he didn't fall to the dark side by embracing his angry, passionate emotions. He fell to the dark side by shutting off his compassion and empathy and trying to turn himself into this unfeeling block of ice. It's like he's not the sort of person who revels in brutality. He's the sort of person who kills as a reflex action without thought, feeling, or emotion. It's like it's like a snake striking. It's not like some tiger mauling you.
His focus is in being the head of this machine for change. Like it's a war machine, so he has to be cold and calculating and uncaring. But his whole focus is on, I have to get rid of this corrupt republic and rebuild this new order.
Right, and then that's even like we were saying before about him not really believing in the prophecy because he's more of a practical kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like he says that
firmly on the ground.
Yeah, he says it with the Jedi. He says like, I really don't think they should be all about this prophecy when they could just do it themselves. Like, why are they waiting for this prophesized chosen one?
Yeah.
When they can just take up their own arms and just get the shit done themselves. Yeah. And that's something I think the biggest thing right there for him is just like taking the initiative, which he feels like the Jedi are doing.
And even beyond that, I totally agree. But even beyond that, like from a perspective of like an elderly Jedi who's like watched like one crisis being like mishandled after another, you're like, so this boy is going to be like the answer to everyone's problems? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I mean, I totally I'm with him like in his reaction to a lot of it.
And
He's
that's
got a healthy skepticism.
And it matches his
when he talks about Qui-Gon.
Yeah.
Well, when he talks about Qui-Gon specifically, when he's like, I don't understand, like, why he's so about this, like, why is he putting all these eggs in the basket of this Anakin kid? Like, what? Like, have I taught him nothing? Like, has he learned nothing from me? You know what I mean? Like, and I think his failing of Jin in a way, like, I think for him, like, he takes that kind of personally, like, why does he think this way when like I'm nothing like that? Also, kind of plays into him leaving as well.
Yeah,
you always view that mindset as Qui-Gon's greatest flaw.
Yeah, and again, it comes
even
back to the whole
Qui-Gon was-
detached, emotional, invested side. He can't see it. It's like, well, I'm super powerful, and I can't possibly solve it by myself. Why are they putting all the boxes in this Anakin fellow? And why is Qui-Gon not understanding this? Did I not teach him well enough? It's like he's this massive kind of central ego. Is if I can't perceive it, then it's obviously not right, kind of thing. Which isn't the focus. Like, I'm not saying he's blinded by all of that. It's like an extra element that ties into his high-minded views. He's always being brought down by that. And you see it so beautifully played out in this.
Yeah. Basically, the whole impression I got from this novel is that Anakin Skywalker as the Chosen One would not have been necessary if the Jedi did their fucking jobs. But the problem is they got so caught up in the whole probing the Force for answers, letting it make their decisions for them, that they kind of lost the ability to assess situations on a practical level and make their decisions from that standpoint, because they were just they're just so focused on being instruments of the Force and letting it lead the way that they're kind of forgetting that, well, we may be instruments of the Force, but we're also agents of the Republic, and we got to uphold that on the problem. Like the problem is that they kind of became a little bit submissive and kind of let other things and groups make their decisions for them. It's like they just followed the Republic's orders, and even if they didn't like a lot of them, and they still followed them, and they just let the Force do all the thinking for them. And a lot of it is just they didn't do their job. Simple as that.
Well, Dooku also mentions that they need to draw on the darker side of their power as well, which is one of the key things about the whole Jedi Order, the fact that they can't really do anything to save the Republic without going into the dark. Not necessarily the dark side, but the darker element of their power, because they'd have to see
compromise their
not so much the
morals.
dark, but the more dominating.
Yeah, they'd have to
of
compromise
it,
their morality to make it work. So I'm saying they can either detach themselves from the Republic and save themselves as an order, or they can stick it out and fight the long defeat, like elves from Lord of the Rings kind of thing. There's no real way they can stop this.
I think there's a difference between saying like just going to the dark side and just thinking like, oh, it's evil, rather than being like dominating a situation because it needs to be dominated because something needs to be stopped.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like dominating in the darker side of their morality as opposed to the dark side of the Force.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's often difficult to confuse that with Star Wars being what it is. But Dooku is definitely the best option for that, having that darker side of what he ultimately perceives as the light. Until he, goes Sith crazy with writing. Which is unfortunate.
With writing? Wait, what'd you say?
Until he goes Sith crazy with the whole writing, like it's all about the dark side gives me such power. It doesn't fit his character at all. It's always
really
been
weird
the thing
too.
that makes no sense.
As much as I like the expanded universe version of Dooku, I never really liked his interpretation in Revenge of the Sith, like at the beginning, where like he wants to like make this whole army of like Sith legions. And he's like really, really like anti-alien and all that kind of stuff. I was like, I mean, I guess he could have those thoughts, but it never rang true for me. That was weird.
It exaggerated them just a little bit too much. It's like, I like the Revenge of the Sith novelization's portrayal in that they got across that he's a stone-cold sociopath. He's not some raging psychotic murderer with anger management issues. He's a stone-cold sociopath. But they just made his views just way too extreme.
Right. I always took that as them running like far inferior damage control to the Xeno's caliber. Like they were thinking, well, we have to make this make sense for the film, so let's make him xenophobic and full of anger, hatred, and stuff.
Right, you're trying to set him up
took that
narrative
approach.
Yeah. The other problem is the fact that it's such a stark and really off-putting contrast from how Dooku is described in Labyrinth of Evil, which took place only a few days prior to Revenge of the Sith. So you're telling me that within the span of a few days, Dooku basically turned from misguided but well-intentioned to card-carrying villain.
Yeah, again, it's just justifying the film, which is what the novels have to do. Novelizations have to do.
Right, it's trying to set him up as like, this is someone you need to hate. You have to want him to die.
Because we haven't got long.
No sympathy. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the Xeno, I feel like anyone could read it and say that yes, he definitely captures the true character of Dooku.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's a block of ice, not a consuming flame.
So what's next? What was after that one?
We have Maul meditating and reminiscing, followed by Sidious's meeting with Varuna, or his last meeting with Varuna on Naboo.
Oh wait, you missed another scene. There's a scene after his meeting with Dooku where Palpatine goes to the Coruscant docks and goes to meet with Padme's family and suggests to them the idea of having Padme run in the election.
Yeah, we nearly missed a huge one with that. Padme's parents, grandparents of Luke.
Mm-hmm. Rui.
I don't care about them. I just care about the political manipulation and like the fallout from that.
I care about that as well. But I mean, the fact that they didn't capture characters.
Well, I think it worked at first because she was kind of a puppet queen for like maybe like the first, like she kind of learns and grows throughout the movie, like the first movie, and like starts making her own decisions and then coming into her own skin. But before that point, she was the puppet queen that Sidious and the Trade Federation wanted. It wasn't like she right off the bat it was a bad idea. Like it was actually a pretty good idea. Like take this 14-year-old malleable young girl and we can if we make her queen and like I become chancellor, I can mold her in any way I want to.
They just underestimated her massively, which they themselves admit later on.
Right, because they pushed her.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, who wouldn't in that situation?
She found something in herself by being pushed.
Why wouldn't they underestimate them? Never underestimate children. But yeah, they made that underestimation and then they paid for it at the price. But I like the fact that we establish her as Padme before she becomes the puppet queen though as well. Like we see her being this kid that's helping
Good Samaritan.
Some goods onto the ship they're going to go and help people. Even before she was a monarch. It's really nice to see. Also, they make a joke about the monotonous voice of the Queen in this.
I didn't wait. Really, there was a line about that.
They describe the posture, the monotone voice, the makeup that makes it look like a giant doll. There's a bit where he's watching the
hollow recording later with the Chancellor.
Okay.
Yeah. I never understood the complaints about the monotonous voice. For me, I thought, why? It's just a take on a Queen's kind of etiquette.
Well, it's not a problem, but when everyone in the movie sounds like that, it's a problem.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, but they always hammer on about the Queen for that one. So I've never had a problem with it. I always thought she sounded.
I was always just more confused by the whole decoy thing at the end of The Phantom, and I didn't get that as a kid at all.
Gotta have a reveal.
I guess.
Yeah,
but you don't. You really don't.
That was the only reason.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it was just like a twist that he wanted, but just didn't really.
I didn't mean to get us on that. I just mean
Yeah.
No,
but yeah, the whole thing.
Your queen.
Padme's always been kind of boring to me. Like even in stuff I like.
I agree.
So I just enjoy.
As far as I'm concerned, Padme's relationship with Anakin is basically the Twilight romance played completely straight. Especially
even
when you read.
Even when she's not in love with Anakin, though, like even when she's talking with other senators, she's just kind of like, "I'm a good person," all the time, and just like it's just really kind of boring. I don't have a good word for it or like a more eloquent way of phrasing it. She's just kind of boring to me. So I just enjoy that in this, she's really not a character. She's just like this sort of instrument for like the plot. And it just makes total sense. And I love that, like I said, Palpatine's not only instrumental in raising up, Anakin's star, he also is doing the same for Padme. And without him, there wouldn't have been a Luke or Leia.
Especially if you contrast that to Leia and like what kind of person Leia is, like she's a far more interesting person. Like you would think that with all the poetic, whatever stuff that George Lucas wanted to do, like he wanted everything to rhyme or whatever. Like, okay, we'll have freaking Padme rhyme to Leia. Like, can we have that? Like, that would have been way more interesting to see, and that would make more sense too for someone who would have made the rebellion, because there were like deleted scenes, where she was like, where Mon Mothma and everybody were like, hey, we should probably do this because this is gonna suck when we have like this empire and stuff like that. But then for like they had to actually convince her to do it rather than like it be her own thing. Like, hey, we need to create this thing.
Yeah,
and it would have been more interesting too.
The force of that entire thing. Yeah, she's the non-militant.
Yeah, and it would have been more interesting too as like a what if scenario if Padme had survived past episode 3, especially because it would make more sense to with Leia saying like, "Oh yeah, I remember my mother.
My mom,
she was kind, was sad." It would have been cool if like, hey, Padme was like the leader of like this resistance that tried to go off like in the first 2 years of the Empire and got shut down, and then we have Vader become like Vader and he kills her or something like that, and something crazy, But
in
that
would have been
to me
in a way that actually would have made a lot more sense if Vader had actually very straight up killed her, like not that bullshit where it's like. Goes for the Force choke, she passes out, and then dies of a broken heart. It's like, he should have fucking killed her.
It's even more important to give her credibility. Like, Anakin, you've gone off the deep end. I'm divorcing you. Like, I'm done.
Right.
Like, don't be all, oh, he's a good person, Obi-Wan, and whatever. I mean,
it reminds me of
nobody. No.
It reminds me of the Lois Lane evil Superman scenario, that kind of thing. Except that her actually escaped the situation rather than sitting there for a few years. It would be that kind of dynamic, like super powerful Vader, and it's like, you love me, and she's like, nope, can't go down this path, and leaves and gets killed as a result.
You will love me, no.
Yeah.
And then for her to go like directly against him too, that would have been an awesome sequence.
It would have been the perfect representation of his whole order mentality at that point, because it's all about order. I have to have made my insanity and evilness count for something. I have to impose order on the galaxy. It'll all be worth it if I have order. And then he ends up killing his wife. And then
and also, what's his name? God, I've lost it. Jimmy Smits. I can remember the actor's name.
Oh, Bail Organa.
Bail Organa. He's a senator. Like, she could like remarry him or something if that's how what's her name Leia becomes like his stepdaughter or something. I don't know.
Anything would have been better than broken heart.
All I'm saying is it just never worked for me. But
some things can't be repaired, unfortunately.
Yeah. Padme as a character is someone I definitely found boring as well. And I mean, I'm usually all for people who are just blandly kind of good, provided they've got some flavour to them. But she just, I mean, ultimately she was completely tainted by the stupidity of her loving Anakin. But even without that, like you say, she was kind of one note all the time.
Yeah.
With and not even just character-wise, she had no real relevance outside of, I'm a senator, here's me saying something senatorial, and here, let me leave and even let that much go to bloody Jar Jar. It's just...
Yeah, and while like the expanded universe has done a lot for certain characters, she's not one of them. Like in everything, she's one note. Like in every property, ever.
I think the problem there is that every single person agrees with us to the point where they just don't want to touch her at all. They only include her out of necessity, and when they do include her, they try and minimize her presence as much as they can because they just don't want to touch.
I mean, thinking on it, I think like, Clone Wars was the thing that did the most for her. Funnily enough, they touched on Padme quite a bit, and there were a few good scenes. But her and Ahsoka, her and that whole situation with the X and Anakin, like there was a lot of
that was probably her best moments.
Probably, yeah. No Padme novels ever.
Of all the characters for the Clone Wars to get right, they got Padme right. Typical.
Funny old world, ain't it?
Yeah, they got a lot of other people right as well, just not previous characters right. But yeah, so Padme's on the scene, causing trouble as she tends to throughout the book. What was the next?
And then what's the next? What's the next bit?
Well, there's a scene where Maul is meditating and kind of thinking about his master and the missions he does, and then that cuts to Sidious on Naboo talking to Varuna for the last time, I believe.
Yeah, because the Maul thing is basically just Maul being Maul, isn't it? It doesn't really have any relevance.
Yeah. I like how Sidious says he will not be content until he kills a Jedi.
It's like, gotta say, lose some time.
The thing I did like about this scene, though, is it kind of showed the whole failure in trying to be a cult leader style Sith Lord, because that's essentially how Palpatine managed Maul. He indoctrinated Maul and made Maul mindlessly loyal to his every word. Like one of the other Star Wars books mentions that Palpatine so ordered, Maul would totally kill himself without hesitation. Yet here, it's like this is Maul thinking about Palpatine's limitations and some of the failures he's observed and realizing that his master isn't all-powerful, that he can be outwitted, that he is fallible. But because he's still so incredibly loyal to his master, rather than, taking the typical Sith thing and thinking about how he can use this for treachery, he's like starting to get worried about his master. It's like, oh shit, what if Palpatine dies? What do I do? Fuck. How can I help my master? Fuck.
I can't be a politician. Look at me. It's like one of his thoughts. But, it is interesting. But again, it's more Maul being Maul besides that. It's unfair, actually. We should have talked about that scene, yeah, because he does explore his whole purpose and how he lacks one at that point. But beyond that, it's Maul being Maul. The Verona scene.
The mooning with Varuna is pretty interesting. He goes to the castle and sees Varuna's very colorful entourage.
Varuna is basically it's like while Padme's out front hosting a rally, Varuna's in the throne room having a banquet with the worst of the galaxy. It's like a Hutt crime boss, the head of Black Sun, like representatives from terrorist organizations, and it's
Bandogora,
the fuck is this guy doing? Like, what the?
Like Palpatine comes in, he's like, oh, more ammo, more ammunition, more ammunition for Padme to bury.
Yeah,
I could just imagine Palpatine leaving the room and just popping at a camera. Yeah. They tease everyone. Clicks and then just runs away and hands it to Padme.
It's just kind of it's just kind of disciples of Jesus shot with all the worst of the worst, like lining up and toasting and drinking and eating in a hut.
It's actually almost kind of presented that way because he's kind of like on his throne with all of them like around him.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
And one of the things that really just made me laugh is that it's mentioned in the scene that Varuna was dressed up in his full royal regalia. So just imagine this guy basically dressed like Padme. And he's a freaking drunk and is hosting a banquet for crime lords and terrorists. It's like
freaking scepter in his hand.
And of course, the most hilarious thing about this all is that Palpatine, as a Sith Lord, is worse than all of them. And you kind of, it's like, and even he's just a little bit. Are you fucking kidding me when he comes in here?
Well, for him, it's all about how this is a stupid thing to be doing right now, kind of thing. It's not less like he wouldn't enjoy himself. It's just this is the wrong time. Nope, definitely not now. Takes camera shot.
Yeah, and they kind of have this little back and forth of insincerity where Varuna's all like, you're helping Padme try to upstage me, that daughter of mountain peasants, and all that. He's like so contemptible in this scene. It's ridiculous.
And he said, like, do you really think she could pull this off? And I just wanted Sidious to go, yep, yep, I think she could pull this off, basically. But no, he just
says,
you
think you can steal from us and walk away? Yeah.
Backs out of the room. But yeah,
he even threatens to remove Palpatine from office after his re-election.
Yeah, and has the whole Plagueis threat as well. Like, you'll never see your little friend Damask again. Cutting to, I believe it cuts to Damask then.
Yeah.
Or Sidious.
Right after.
Guys, I just want to cover this scene in one sentence, because basically, Plagueis gets in the ship, flies away, just as someone literally nukes his fortress. Like, they don't just bomb this place from orbit, they fucking nuke it. Like, they're so determined to kill him that they nuke his castle.
And Plagueis was like so shocked about that. He's like, "Really?"
That's exactly it. He hangs on the window going, "What?
Shocked.
Really?"
Yeah, and it's like, I'm not joking about the nuking. It's explicitly stated that they used a goddamn nuke to destroy his castle.
So
and they say that Plagueis was completely just like in awe about this. He was like,
it's like this is Plagueis' turn to go, are you fucking kidding me? You're fucking kidding me. They freaking tried to kill me with a goddamn nuke.
Very nearly succeeded
How the hell
as
did
well.
they get a nuke?
If he had been like 20 minutes late.
Yeah, that's what he even says, that they're scarce, so.
It's like,
fuck? If that group of criminals can't get their hands on one, who can, though?
Well, yeah, of course, but the fact that they're rare as in they're not really around much for the sake of their better weapons or more practical weapons or whatever, and they just use that for the sheer power of it and the overkill. But yeah, it's a near miss as well, and he's like, turns around and goes, Darkseid did it.
That's the more important part to me, is that it really ought to have worked.
Yeah, it was like, if he had 20 minutes less warning,
giving
that would have been him in debt.
Jabba of all people.
Yeah.
That's why he's like, yep, I'm putting him in the ally category. Useful.
Jabba even gives him a lift. Gives him a lift after.
Yeah, and Jabba picks him up as well, which is great.
Yeah, it gives him a lift.
Oh,
also this scene's the. I was just gonna say that
favorite details.
Hang on. Sorry, Evan first. 1 second.
Okay.
I was just gonna say that this scene's also kind of like the introduction of the infiltrator, which is.
Yes,
crap! I was gonna mention that.
I'm sorry.
About it. Yeah, it is a cool description for it as well. Because it is a cool ship, and arguably underrated, given that it belongs to one of the most popular Star Wars characters of all time.
It could turn invisible, for Pete's sake.
No ship that small has a cloaking device.
Yeah,
I know.
and like even Jabba's all like, you have to show me the secret of your invisible ship, Master. Like even he's impressed.
People are always impressed with that in Star Wars. Like, wait, it can turn invisible? No ship that small has a cloak. Like, there are a number of ships that small that have cloaking devices, and yet it still doesn't seem to be common knowledge when it gets to the Empire stage.
Not exactly easy technology to pull off.
No. But you think it would be like manufactured to some level if it was possible?
Well, I mean,
who's sitting on that plan? It's like, oh yeah, it's the most popular, most lucrative schematic in the universe.
It's talked about in universe that the reason why cloaking devices are so scarce is because they're powered by these things called Stygium crystals, which are ridiculously difficult to get hold of. So it's like, even if you got the money to construct a cloaking device, if you don't have a ready and available source of Stygium crystals, you're screwed. So
I guess it's good that they never figured that out, to give to the Death Star.
Jesus
Christ.
No, although they would want people to see it. That was the whole point.
But they just haven't materialized.
But just imagine, like, in the sky, then just all of a sudden just appearing out of nowhere.
It wouldn't even appear on the sensors. It would just suddenly, Death Star blots out the sun. Everyone in the space station is going, oh, well, we're dead.
Yeah.
Not be good.
But
yeah, that's that scene.
He goes to back to Coruscant, meets with Sidious. It talks about his penthouse too.
Yeah, Plagueis Higo Damask didn't simply keep a penthouse on Coruscant. He owned an entire building.
Which for Coruscant is pretty substantial, given that every single building is like...
Yeah.
Which there's also kind of like a veiled reference to Thrawn in this scene, because they talk about how the building has one of the few instances of views of naked rock from the day.
And surface water. It's like the two big locations on Coruscant that are talked about a lot in the EU but never featured in the films is like the peak of the Minari Mountains, the one little instance where there's some uncovered surface rock, and the Western Sea, the only body of water on Coruscant. And it's like...
Which is what Luke sees from his viewpoint in the Thrawn trilogy.
And Plagueis, from his penthouse, can see them both.
I really love to see Luzuno's house, because he must just have everything Star Wars in it. Like every single
just a big map of the galaxy,
with.
like over his bed or something.
Oh yeah, just books lining the shelves. I mean, every single reference possible. Like, what haven't I mentioned in this book yet? Oh, let's find a reference in here. Squeeze it into a single sentence. It's insane, his knowledge.
So not too much happens when they meet. They just kind of meet, converse, and talk about that, and then they make their plans for revenge. They set up Darth Maul's not only getting the infiltrator, but also his escapade to eliminate Black Sun.
Yes, another comic that he references right there.
Well, and also going a little bit too far and talking about the Sith and all that stuff. He's like,
which we'll get to in a chapter.
He's like, I hope you thank him before you killed him.
Yeah, well, let's wait a sec for that. So they plan their revenge, and I believe it cuts to Varuna being killed by Plagueis. Does it not? That's the next scene.
Yeah. We're in the most fabulous way possible for Plagueis. Like he just sneaks right in. Explains in great length how difficult it was to sneak right in, which I loved, because in most things they just kind of cut straight to the quick of it and have it be, oh, I've managed to get in because superpowers. Like he actually had to put some thought into this, and gets in and just clicks on the light. Face still obscured in the darkness when he wakes Varuna up. Leading straight in for the first... No, not the first we see. It's been referenced before, but it's the first midichlorian will to die scene we have, right? Is that correct?
It's the only one we have.
The only time he's ever used his midichlorian manipulation to straight up kill someone.
Oh yeah, because before it was just resurrecting. No, he willed them to die as well. Willed Venomous to die and then brought him back to die. Brought him back.
Well, that comes
willed
later.
Him to die.
I thought it was beforehand.
Willed him to die and then resurrected him several times.
Yeah, but it's the first time we see him kill anyone with it properly, like on screen, as it happens.
Yeah,
in the moment,
which was satisfying for this guy.
Yeah, and it's also kind of terrifying too, because it's like, in a way, this killing is just more scary than any of those times that Palpatine has crisped someone with Force lightning, or any of those times that Vader has choked the life from you with telekinesis. Like, this is Plagueis basically altering your basic nature as a being and making it so you cannot live anymore.
Fun times.
So it's almost like a Dementor's kiss.
Oh god, yeah.
Oh, geez. In the sense that like that kind of violation, that you're getting something sucked out of you.
It is pretty similar.
It's complete overkill as well, which is so good because it's overkill. It fixes Plagueis' revenge.
Well, he
point at
tried to
this point.
nuke him, so I
Yeah,
I
but
don't
Isaac,
think
he's like,
yeah.
I completely understand where you're coming from, and I would have done the same thing. It's just, I would have succeeded, and then completely strangled
Well,
him.
much.
it's similar to the end of the book with like insult to injury.
Yeah. It's just, bye-bye. Oh, by the way, should I explain what I'm doing to you right now? I'm right now willing you to die with my mind.
Because I'm
this guy can't
the
even
Dark
talk to
Lord
him.
of the
He's
Sith,
sucking.
motherfucker.
Mm.
I'm Darth Plagueis.
And he even sits on the bed beside him as well. As I walks over and sits on the bed, pats him. So should I tell you what I'm doing to you? It's brilliant. It's pure sinister Sith, and it's beautiful to watch. And from Plagueis
It's like-
as well.
it's-
Who's such
I
a
like
cerebral
that
character.
because like
it's
if you
both
think
pure-
of like a Sith Lord and what they usually look like, it would be like you're in a hospital bed and death is
Yeah.
like your visitor.
Yeah, literally
Yeah.
that. And it'd be so tall,
Black
stupidly
robes.
tall head as well, like robes. Like, this guy's huge, and he just sitting on you and patting the bed beside him as he slowly wills you to die. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could stop this.
The
I could bring you
scary
back
thing
as
about
well,
this is
but I'm not
that-
going to.
Yeah, this particular scene, it's like, yes, it is creepy, scary Sith Lord, but this is something, it's also another one of those scenes that seems like it could have come straight out of The Godfather. It's like you could just say, oh, while you were sleeping, I poisoned you, and you're slowly dying, and I'm just sitting here watching you die, knowing you can't do anything about it.
You know, it has
Fun
like a
times.
direct parallel to Kill Bill Volume 2, where you have oh my god, what was her name? The one-eyed chick, the one who was jealous, the blind. Oh my god, what was her name? Elle? No, it's not Elle.
Ellie Driver.
Ellie Driver, yes, and she's like just sitting there while oh my god, Bud is just dying from venom, and she's like, all right, let me whip out my little thing I got on Wikipedia and tell you what this is doing to you right now, and she says like everything that's happening with the venom that's coursing through him, and how soon he'll die. Well, no, how soon he'll die with just a single dose, and then how he got bit like several times. It was like, yeah, totally adding salt to the wound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, I actually remember the names of the character because Asby.
It's just classic Plagueis. And in many ways not as well, which makes it even scarier because he's so much cerebral and detached all the time.
I think it's what you were saying earlier. You actually made the point that, you know, at this point he's becoming more Darth Plagueis than he is becoming Hego Demas. So I think that's like
true.
very valid. What you said before.
He's getting a little bit caught up in the drama of being a Sith Lord, whereas what his greatest successes before now have been thanks to his kind of Dooku-esque mentality where he's detached and cold, whereas now he's really starting to get into it, and this is the point where he's making little missteps. And this is something that is kind of called out. It's like here in this scene where he's killing Varuna, he outright states, "Hi, I'm Dark Lord of the Sith. My name is Darth Plagueis." And it's like, in the very next scene, we got Palpatine berating Maul for telling Alexi Garen he's a Sith Lord. And then later on after that, when Palpatine mentions that to Plagueis is like, okay, so why is
He's
this
dead.
a big... Yeah, why does this matter? And Palpatine's like, it's a security breach. It doesn't matter if the guy is dead. Who knows who might have overheard you? Like, what the fuck are you doing, man?
Which
what do you
kind
need
of
to do
leads
that
into
for in the first
Shadowhunter.
place?
Yeah, which leads into Darth Maul Shadowhunter too, because someone did overhear Maul.
It's just really funny.
Well, Shadowhunter's just like Maul's so competent, but at the same time he fucks up at every turn. So
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of him. He's not like a strategist.
No, it's perfect.
You know,
I like it.
you know.
Loose
Yeah,
cannon.
I
Yeah.
like that.
He's
It's
an
just ironic.
assassin. He's
He's a straight
Darth
up assassin.
Maul. Yeah, he's Palpatine's leg breaker. That's what he is. It's like he's not unintelligent. He's very competent, but at the same time, he's not a strategist. And I think that's one of the other areas where Clone Wars screwed up Maul. It's like they didn't give us the warrior assassin we fell in love with. They basically just gave us a Palpatine wannabe with Darth Maul's
He
character.
shouldn't be a schemer. He shouldn't
No.
be a schemer. So that's number one.
He's
But,
as Plagueis is
yeah.
at this point in the book. He's arrogant. His confidence has turned to arrogance by this point. It's made him overconfident, and it's made him
Right, which I
it's
think
made him
is they're
blunt
setting
and
that up for
unsubtle.
what happens to him in the Phantom Menace. I think that Lucino does it a lot. He makes a lot of mentions about Maul, like what's going to happen to him and
Yeah.
why it happens to him, and
Pride.
it's his hubris that does it. You know,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, he's writing this with script in hand, and like he's
Right.
just reading. Oh, that's when that happened. Yeah, okay.
I don't think he even needs a script. I mean, this is Lucino. He just has it all memorized.
Oh, maybe not. But there's times where like he's totally quoting exactly what was
Oh
said.
yeah.
But
I remember the "You're Our Only Hope" moment in this as well. It's like, oh, a bit on the nose, but okay, it's Star Wars.
Yes.
I'll let it pass.
And then the Black Sun being disordered and just a little slip in of Prince Zizor, like coming in and saying, he's going to take it over. And it's like, oh my God, Lucina, stop doing that. You're too good at that.
It's just proof that it can be done. It can be done.
I think that character's name is supposed to be pronounced like Shishor or Shizor or something.
It's Zizor.
I've already read it. Yeah, I've already read it as Zizor.
Okay, cool.
Oh, speaking of the audio drama right now, just before I forget, it's kind of insignificant, but did anyone else find that Dooku's voice was really weird in this one? The audiobook, sorry.
I tried listening to the audiobook at first, but I didn't.
I think
it was a bit too throaty. It was a bit too throaty.
Yeah, it was like, that doesn't sound like Christopher Lee at all. I mean, you have some of the characters you have.
Yeah,
no, I know, but like, I feel like this was like weirdly off compared to the rest of his voices that were relatively on point.
He did sound a little bit like kind of like if there was a cartoon of like some kind of cheesy sort of English drama or something, and like he would be like the grandpa like in the corner like so did you like, that's more what he said. He doesn't sound anything like Christopher.
I got a lot more of the Saruman like baritone voice more than the it's like, oh, Qui-Gon, that's terrible. But Qui-Gon Jinn, when Count Dooku's talking to Kenobi, like Christopher Lee Dooku mode, he went more for the Saruman side for me, which I felt a bit weird.
He was once my apprentice, just as you were once his, that sort of thing.
Master Yoda, you disappoint me.
Yes.
Like, it's less crisp. It's just, no, Master Kenobi, sorry. Anyway, but yeah, it just felt odd to me. I had to throw it in though, but it was never going to come up again otherwise. Sorry to derail us.
It's okay.
What were we talking about? I am derailed. What's the next?
Well, they had to back the blockade. That's like just a little snippet like that.
Yeah.
This is the hardest part of the book for me to remember because there's just so much shit going on, like in quick succession.
Well, there's like a meeting. There's like a senatorial meeting with all the potential candidates for senator, and Plagueis and Sidious encounter Sifo-Dyas. Well, Plagueis encounters Sifo-Dyas. Right. Sidious actually goes off to receive the holocron from Jax Pavan, which again goes into the Shadowhunter novel.
Yeah.
Although there is a little scene before that where they're just kind of walking on the street and just talking about. I mean, we already kind of mentioned about the whole Black Sun thing, but they do also mention Half Monchar in that scene.
You're talking about Plagueis and Palpatine walking. And Palpatine is explaining what's going. Yeah, I like that scene because Plagueis said something that Palpatine took as a slight, even though Plagueis didn't mean it that way.
Not you. I'm talking about the.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
And even
I really enjoyed the whole. But just the imagery of like you're walking along and then you insult him by accident and he stops walking and his eyes are just glowing there in the dark or whatever. Like that's cool.
Yeah,
I'd like to see that.
Around like not you, God, obviously not you, Jesus. But it kind of goes to highlight the whole relationship, doesn't it? Plagueis isn't ever treating Sidious like he's a nothing, or at least not by this by halfway through the book. He's always like seething in his little cloak, and even the lack of comfort from Sidious. Like he's all like people are listening in the street, and then Plagueis is like, oh, let's sit down. It's like, here, have a bench. It's like, well, why are you looking around, kind of thing. It's I love the whole dynamic between the two. So you've got to be more careful. Why are you discussing things like this in the middle of the street? It's like, Plagueis is like, what's going to happen? And then you move straight into the whole Pavan thing, where something very nearly does happen. And Sidious is just wonderfully sitting and taking in the sweet irony of the situation. Meanwhile, at the same time, because Lucino is a master of referencing things while also repairing the prequels, we have the whole Sifo-Dyas thing, which has felt a lot more... Because originally when I said it was a bit out of nowhere, the Sifo-Dyas thing, right? Because I hadn't known about this scene at this point.
First meeting.
I'm a peasant and hadn't read the book by that point. This way made a lot more sense. Like, he was kind of bringing it back in again. And I liked Plagueis' delivery of the whole argument. It felt really organic, which the previous one didn't. It felt kind of like out of nowhere and really obvious. But this one was like, I believe I mentioned something like this, and I have a genuine concern for the sake of the galaxy, or at least my interest in it. We need an army now.
I think it's just I agree with you, but like I just because of the way you normally point stuff out, to me it was like, hey, remember what we talked about 20 years ago? I still got concerns. It just seemed this one seemed a little bit even more forced to me in contrast to what happened before.
Even Cyberdios was like, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I found that funny. I was like, "Wait, you don't remember?" Because I mean, I thought, and then I remembered that. Oh, wait, yeah, this wasn't like 2 years ago. This was 20 years ago. I'll grant you that one. Slip of the mind. Fair enough.
Cyberdios has probably been a bit busy since then, you know.
Yeah, Jedi life is not peaceful. But yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. But for me, the approach felt more organic. Like he's coming to, oh look, a Jedi I have found in this scenario. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to go tell Valorum, and then I'm going to do, like obviously he wasn't going to do that. But from Cyberdios' perspective, he was just seeing a concerned Plagueis bringing the news before him, separate from the council. Like it made sense, which is impossibly difficult to pull off when it comes to this specific scenario, because the whole Cyberdios thing never really made any sense. It was very cool.
Talks about the Kaminoans and how they can't create an army for him, but they would for a Jedi.
Yeah, and I've been reported that I can't create a Jedi clone as well.
Yeah, well, Cyberdios even asks, if you try and clone Jedi, and he's like, I'm sure such a thing is impossible.
Yeah, it's actually not impossible, but everyone keeps saying it is.
That's something they really
they
go up and down
over that
a lot in the EU. Yeah.
It's one of those things that was really, really one of the central plot points in the novelization of The Force Unleashed 2. And basically the conclusion I personally have come to based on the information presented is that it's not impossible, but it's so ridiculously difficult and finicky that unless you're planning on just cloning one specific Jedi for one specific purpose, it's not worth it. Trying to clone an army of Jedi just will not work, because you're talking about an army of schizophrenic psychos with elemental powers that they can't control. It's like, do you think those deformed creatures from the end of The Force Unleashed 2 would make an effective army? You know, this whole army of mutant Sam Witwers screaming gibberish at you?
Yeah, and there's Jorah Sabayoth, who is also in the scene, because, the scene is a genius.
Sorta, yeah.
Juxtaposing that.
Since Jorah Sabayoth just became part of our discussion, one little idea I came up with as a change to the prequel trilogy that should have been done in advance that might have actually made things just a wee bit better is, instead of creating the character of Dooku, instead introduce Jorah Sabayoth as the Sith apprentice in Attack of the Clones. Like, literally still have Christopher Lee, just a name change. Instead of Count Dooku, this is Jorah Sabayoth. The whole story plays out exactly as it did. It's literally nothing more than a name change. But it would change so much. And it would really improve a lot of things in my view. But that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to mention it.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving on?
Yep, next point.
Moving on.
Does anyone have the next scene? Because I forget the order of these things.
It's like I said, this is the
well, there's
part of the book
I think the next scene is when Chancellor
Palpatine is having a meeting with Chancellor Valorum, and the scene starts off with Palpatine basically looking at Valorum's office and saying, "This office sucks. I want a bigger one."
This will not do.
Said, you know what? Once I'm Chancellor, I'm going to have a whole new building made, and I'm going to have a bigger office, and it's going to have blackjack and hookers.
Which explains where the rotunda came from in the prequels. That big building that they all fly into.
The Senate office building.
Yeah, I also like how Valorum's all like, I wanted to bring a diplomacy informed by the ideals of the Jedi, and then Palpatine's just sitting there like in his head, but he's like, yeah. He's like he suppresses the urge to strangle him.
Yeah.
It's like,
And the thing that does make me laugh, too, is the fact that Valorum is another one of those characters with a huge amount of hypocrisy going on. Because, well, it's like he's not as corrupt as a lot of the other guys in this game, but there's no question that he still is corrupt.
He's not clean. Not even close.
Yeah. He is a guy that has made his share of backroom dealings and has made his compromises. Like, he's just one of those guys who's always trying to justify his actions as for the greater good, rather than just saying, "Hi, I'm Littlefinger. Chaos is a ladder."
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely Littlefinger and not Varys.
And in the same scene too, we get the kind of like the announcement of the blockade to Naboo, because we have Amidala, contacting the two of them and informing them of what the Trade Federation has done. which goes back to that reference Callan mentioned about the "your only hope" thing.
Yeah, it was a bit on the nose.
Yeah.
I'll let it slide.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was a good scene. I liked again how Sidious is. This is where I imagined him putting on that Palpatine smirk at this point. Yeah, the whole contortion of the face, tortoise smirk that he has with the opera scene with Anakin. Because it's where you can imagine him being in properly in Phantom Menace mode. You know, same kind of same kind of kit, same position at that point, and then he just steps into the whole scene and plays the game as he always does. Only this time directly into events of Phantom Menace, which we haven't really seen before this point.
Yeah, it's a direct. Everything up until this point is gonna be direct parallel to Phantom Menace.
So anything else?
Well, speaking of which, like in the next chapter after that, Sidious and Plagueis are together discussing the blockade after it's been launched, but they actually get informed that Valorum requested Jin and Kenobi to intercede.
Yes,
without the approval of the Senate.
Yeah,
which is a big thing. I think I even like the commentary that Plagueis says that they're Sidious says that Qui-Gon and Kenobi are like a little pesky duo, which I thought was like
it was like they keep undermining our plans.
Cool that he's giving him props in that way.
Yeah. They are formidable force.
It is kind of continuing the theme. Sorry. Shall you go for it or shall I?
Yeah,
well, I was going to say sure because I thought Plagueis was like, I think a little bit too cognizant of how Qui-Gon would subvert the Trade Federation and their droids. Like he was like, he's going to evade their detection. I was like, that's a little bit too like he knows too much about like exactly how to go about. Script in hand. I was kind of heavy-handed. I was like, he wouldn't know all that. I mean, like he could say, they'll probably evade their stupid droids, but not like to that extent, you know.
I don't know.
I think it actually does kind of continue on the. I think this does kind of continue on the theme of how that particular line of Jedi Master Apprentice themes seems to are always super high profile and having a lot of effect. It's like Anakin and Kenobi basically became the Republic heroes during the Clone Wars. And here we have Jin and Kenobi talked about as so notable that even the Sith are kind of looking at them sideways. And earlier in the book, it's talked about how Dooku and Jin, working together, had actually inadvertently subverted several of Darth Tenebrous' plans. Yeah. And I can only imagine what sort of mischief, actually, Thame Cerulean
doesn't exist.
As far as I've constructed this whole headcanon backstory in my head where Thame Cerulean is basically directly responsible for every single thing that is wrong with Dooku as a person, and that Dooku's fall to the dark side, is Thame Cerulean's fault for being a shitty Jedi.
I just ignore him. I'm like, Dooku was trained by Yoda. That's it. He was Yoda's Padawan, personal Padawan. They did stuff together, just the two of them. End of story.
That's how both kind of happened. I mean, it was kind of like that they had a lot of private lessons together. Like that definitely happened. Whether or not they were direct master apprentice, partnership.
They pretty clearly were. I mean, if you
Dark Rendezvous kind of cements it for me personally.
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean, like it could have just been like private lessons with Yoda, because Yoda could have been at that point, been like, I don't want to take anybody. I mean, it could work both ways. Like I think.
I agree. It could definitely work both ways. But in terms of the headcanon, again, going back to the whole EU, how we make things work thing, I feel like this is definitely one where you could easily just go, let's ignore that for the sake of.
I don't even know if it's headcanon because kind of the movies. I mean, they straight up say it. Like,
that's why I don't get who brought up Thame Cerulean. Like, who created him?
And the weirdest thing also is the fact that apparently Thame Cerulean was George Lucas's idea. But
it's like saying it would be as if somebody introduced a character who was secretly Qui-Gon's master, even though the film said otherwise. Like there's no point to it. And his personality is odd. I can't imagine how he would have trained a Dooku.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's kind of the same thing with what happened with Kenobi. I mean, the Jedi Master that taught me, and then suddenly it's Qui-Gon Jinn in the prequels. They obviously feel like it's a bit bendable in that regard.
Well, Yoda is a little different, I guess, because he's
taught everyone.
He's Yoda.
yeah, to some degree.
But it does come off like in the films. It's more than just you were in my youngling class when I was teaching everybody.
Yeah.
In groups, like it's you were my Padawan or whatever. It seems like
and
that.
we know that Yoda trained Ki-Adi Mundi one-on-one, so...
So it wasn't like recently it was... he hasn't been doing it of late. Because how old is Kiadi? Like 50?
He's the
60?
same age as Qui-Gon.
Yeah, so
he was born the
50s.
same year as Qui-Gon.
Yeah, it's the 50s.
So it's like Dooku,
I always use
like,
Anya Kuro to gauge all their ages.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
No, but like Dooku could have been
has to be
Yoda's
older.
second to last personal Padawan, and then Mundi was his last, and then he stopped until Luke, obviously, but like formally.
Yeah. And we're losing steam in this
we're just
podcast.
like,
We
let's
need to
go
stop
back to
cutting
the-
off.
Yeah.
What's next?
I don't
Oh,
know.
it's a lot-
it's a lot of reference.
The
Things
Darth
really
Maul
happened, like-
and Plagueis observation.
Which
Yeah.
one?
Oh, when they're on the balcony, like
Yeah,
it's
the
like
yeah.
touch-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally
Well,
just off camera.
even
It's
before
only
that,
lines,
there's
you know.
even before that, there's like a musing where Plagueis is like, "Oh, I should probably ask my buddy Jabba to apprehend the Queen," but he's like, but then it's like a cool thing that he says, like, "Well, I'm not sure how the dark side will feel about that." Like these last 2-3 chapters, he's really talking about like the fate of the Force and like what it means, and like with Anakin who's about to show up, and then just with his doubts and stuff like that. Like everything he does, he's like, "Oh my God, is it okay that I'm doing this?"
He's almost kind of perceiving the shadow points in the Force at this point. That's very much this kind of description we're given. When he looks at Anakin, he's like, "Whoa, he's going to be," he's already.
Yeah, he sees everything.
His Zacs are already
He sees
casting,
Vader,
stuff
yeah.
across the stars. Yeah, he sees the cyborg of Vader.
There's another scene here in this section, I guess, where another meeting between Palpatine and Dooku. And the thing about this that just makes me really laugh is the fact that the two of them are meeting in a restaurant called Mock's Cheap Eats. And it's a small little thingy that's described as being right on the edge of the works. So we're basically talking about a McDonald's on the edge of an industrial wasteland. And you got Christopher Lee and Ian McDiarmid in this scene. Like, just picture this as something that was actually filmed. It's like, you basically got these two guys eating in a restaurant, in a McDonald's, on the edge of an industrial wasteland.
It's
Like,
straight
that's
out of a
like-
Robot Chicken sketch, that's for sure. And Dooku actually remarks, like, "I hope the food's better than the view." And he's like, wipes off some water from his coat.
I thought it was kind of weird that, Lucina didn't really have to bring it up, but he brings up the point that when Palpatine first has Anakin in his presence, he doesn't sense anything about him, which, you could say that he did. You don't have to say that he didn't, or I don't know, because it was kind of weird just to even bring that up as a point, because I felt like it was kind of like that wouldn't really
It's
happen.
like
like he would have
saying-
sent
Yeah.
oh man,
It's
this
like
kid
declaring, I didn't notice him.
Yeah, it's like-
like
just because he didn't give a reaction in the movies doesn't mean
Yeah.
right, like
Yeah.
you could have easily written that in and be like, "Oh yeah, I did sense that boy," and then bring it up
Just
that,
make it-
"Oh yeah, I did. I didn't think the boy was like this chosen one person that you're afraid about, but I did sense that he was pretty powerful." Like, you didn't have to make that
I
little side.
I thought it played into that whole, certain people can be so overwhelmingly more powerful that they don't register immediately on your senses. Like, it's that biggest gap. I thought it was playing into that whole thing, where like the scale of his power was so dwarfing everything else, it just kind of registered as a non-presence at that point. And then when attention was drawn to it, was like, wait a second, I didn't see that. Like, I didn't send off alarm bells in my mind personally. But it probably was just to cover up the
It's
hole.
not,
He didn't
it's
realize
not a
he was
huge
seeing.
deal, though.
Yeah.
But it's like narratively, it's a little bit like calling attention to the fact that I didn't notice something. Like, it's a little like, if you had really not noticed him, he suddenly now remembers everything about him when he's brought up. So it's a little weird.
I guess it goes either way, really.
And then even when Plagueis trying to meet Anakin, like I was like, "Oh my God, is he gonna there's gonna be some scene that we never saw or whatever?" But it doesn't really happen.
That was just that was so hilariously desperate. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna.
he was like
barge
rushing
into
through the hall.
Where is he?
Yeah.
Where is
It
he?
influences the hate
Where's
man
my
to
guy?
the
like
little
let
the
him
little
in.
human slave boy from
Yeah,
the
it's
desert.
just like,
I need to talk
yeah.
to. Like, why do you? I
It's
mean,
like,
what?
Why?
what? Yes,
Yeah, and the handmaiden's so confused. It's just
so the Queen's not here. I don't want the Queen. I want the little slave boy you brought in the ship. Where is it? Where is he? And he runs back. He's like, God damn it, Qui-Gon's already taken him. What do we do? He's like, if they take him on, we're screwed. He's like, why are we screwed?
Yeah.
I don't know, I've just got this
that
feeling.
didn't make sense to me either. Because okay, if they train him, you could still coerce him, and like even Sidious
Or
says
just
it later.
kill
He's
him,
like, he was too young, or kill him. Yeah, he was too young to be trained by the Sith and too old to be trained by the Jedi. It's like, well, I mean, either case, it works in our favor. Like, okay, they train him and we take him later, like we're doing with Dooku right now, or they don't take him and then hey, then we got him. You know, like wasn't that huge of an issue?
Plagueis been in the dark side for too long or something. Like he's just not.
Right.
He's
Well,
not
that's
thinking.
exactly
Like,
it, though, isn't it? I mean, he's seen this Force portrayal, and he's so paranoid about the Force striking back at this point that the second he hears,
like,
wait a second, Child of the Prophecy, what? Like 9 years old? That was when I did the thing. Oh crap!
Right.
No panic! And then
when
it was
like
basically
Plagueis
that.
from like 30 years ago or whenever this started, he would have been like prophecy. I mean, whatever. Like he wouldn't care. Like he'd have the Dooku mentality, and now he's all like on Qui-Gon's level. Like the prophecy's everything.
Yeah.
Qui-Gon's the key. Kill Qui-Gon. That'll solve everything. It's like
I love that. I love that little bit.
like-
Qui-Gon's the key. If we save the
Yeah,
cheerleader, save the world. It was like amazing.
Yeah, and it's also like for real. Like even if, let's say that Qui-Gon's death would have solved it, like what proof does he have? Like he's just desperately clinging to like whatever's in front of his face right now. He's totally a different character at this point than when we met him.
And also, it makes
He's the only
sense. You know,
Jedi
it's one of
Master
those
there. It must be
spin
him.
wheels that actually can be on. You know, it's understandable. It's believable. It's,
Oh yeah,
it makes it so
yeah.
good. And again, even though we have this, he's not a completely different character. He withdraws from that. He goes back into the Hugo Damas mentality temporarily. Obviously changed, but still not fundamentally separate from the character we know at the start, which is really difficult to pull off. It doesn't like just switch like that on the fly for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's not insane. He's just slowly
Paranoid.
losing that knack that made him so cool. He's just unraveling.
Yeah. Kind of just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean that
You were saying
the
before,
Force isn't
Kellen,
out to
like
get me.
it's
kind of
exactly, it's him being more Darth than not.
The mask. So after
Hello?
that, we cut.
Oh no, I said
thing. Yeah,
Darth.
no,
than
we
not, not
did
Darth.
hear that. Sorry, yeah.
So after that scene, his little vision cuts to the election, in some regards, talking about the.
Well, in the party too, like that's like the whole.
Well, like it hasn't. Well, there's like a scene where they talk about like the odds makers and like the stuff they were preparing, and then it goes to the opera house.
I love the whole.
Or the
There's only one thing they
Yeah,
could do.
let's talk about the opera.
We've got to go to the opera. And, like, there's an entire line inside. We have to go to the opera. It's like I don't know why. It struck me as extremely amusing.
Yeah.
And
Like
they go
the
to
night
watch the
before-
same
the night
thing
before the election.
that I saw before. Yeah.
Okay,
Have you
one,
ever heard the
one thing I
story
just
of
wanted one thing I just wanted to mention about the opera scene is that it's not explicitly stated, but when you actually when you actually read the descriptions and pay attention to a lot of the details, the opera that Plagueis and Palpatine went to go see before Plagueis' death was the exact same opera showing that Palpatine and Anakin were watching in Revenge of the Sith.
Yep.
The Mon Call feature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the exact same show, and it's like,
Yeah.
wow.
I didn't even notice that. You guys are such nerds.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Wandering metaphors
Sorry.
alternated with symbol-laden projections. It's like basically everything described here is basically that opera scene from Revenge of the Sith, and you realize that holy shit, this is basically a different production of the same show, and this is what Plagueis and Palpatine watched on the night of la 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 la.
The murder. Quick question: Did Anakin or did Palpatine summon Anakin to see him at the opera? Like, did Anakin come into the room and say, "You wanted to see me, Chancellor," or something? Was that how that scene opened?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that means that he deliberately went to the same thing to tell him the story about Darth Plagueis the Wise. Like, this is what I did on the night of. Do you remember? See, ultimate troll. He's just a troll. You never heard the plan of Darth Plagueis the Wise. It's like, oh god.
Yeah.
While
Oh
we're
god.
watching the opera, we watched the night I killed him.
Yeah.
It was such a glorious night. The moon was out then. And it's like
And it's just coincidental that the opera looks like egg and sperm or whatever. So
That's not a bad. It's not bad.
it's ridiculous.
Yes. Okay. So they watch the opera. Plagueis and Sidious drink at the opera, have a late dinner. Then they
I
retire.
think they kind of points out the alcohol in that scene, doesn't he? Like the drink's flowing. It's like, oh god, I know what's coming. Oh.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
it
they
didn't
cut.
make
Then
sense
they
to me at
cut
all.
to. Well, then they cut to Palpatine's penthouse where they talk about their plans with the election. And then following that, Palpatine starts giving his speech or practicing his speech to Plagueis about, what he's going to say when he's elected.
Did anyone like this scene as is?
Nope. It made no sense that Plagueis just goes like that to the stupid mode.
I liked. Well, let's like go through the scene and like talk about it before. I think we should probably really go into what happens before we. I don't know.
Fair enough. That's
well. What happens is he just gets him like totally loaded, and then he kills him. Like,
but it's not even planned. That's the worst thing. Like if it was drugged or if it was like stronger alcohol for that exact reason, it's nothing to do with that. He's like, oh, you've gotten drunk. Cool. It's like that's basically it. There's no.
Just gets him completely shit-faced.
I always had
he gets drunk on wine. He gets drunk on wine, falls asleep.
For the first time in 20 years, he chooses this moment to fall asleep. It's like
Sidious gets up.
None of it rang true to me. I mean, like the speech was awesome for the speech on its own.
Yeah, I like the speech
everything
part.
leading up to it was just so like forced.
I mean, you can feel it as he's drinking. It's like, what, no, stop! Don't pick up that. Oh, it's like then he carries on like, don't pick up that drink. No, and it's like, why are you doing this?
And there was no motivation to why he would be that confident. Like, what was happening that made him that confident to be that comfortable?
Yeah, he just didn't perceive Sidious as a threat because he thought they were partners. Supposedly, it was like it just went. It just stopped being wise for an evening. Don't know why. Yeah. And then suddenly he was so tired he couldn't go on any longer. Like he couldn't. I mean, why was he drinking? He's not like someone who takes pleasure in that to a great deal.
Well, I mean, he doesn't take pleasure in eating, for business. It's not like they never say he despises drinking.
No, I know. I'm just saying that it's like he's not a big deal. Like if he was an alcoholic, then whatever. But it's just he's just drinking like this much now for why? Like, couldn't he postpone that until Sidious left?
I actually found a bit of fan art on DeviantArt where they showed the breakfast choices of various Star Wars characters, and they had a picture of Darth Plagueis as he go to Mask, and it's like Darth Plagueis' breakfast, single malt whiskey. And
it didn't ring true for me.
It doesn't ring true at all. I mean, it's not even just his personality. It's like, why would you do that? Like, what Sith Lord would ever do that? I'm gonna get drunk off my ass and just fall asleep in front of my apprentice. Discounting everything that I know has happened historically. I mean,
the thing, if they had established that Plagueis during his hermitage had become a little bit self-indulgent, it's like, okay, not a problem. Like maybe he's showing it, so it's like in all of their scenes together, it's like they're watching the Darth Maul recording, and you got Plagueis standing there with a goblet of wine drinking, and it's just like kind of establishing that he's become a little bit of an alcoholic during his time off, and now it's just that.
Also, for a book that has so carefully held the balance between Plagueis and Sidious, obviously it tilts towards Sidious towards the end, but for a book that's held the perspective of both characters so well balanced together, we don't get anything from Plagueis during his death. Like, it's all Sidious. Like, oh, what's that? You're trying to keep yourself alive. Oh, and he's like...
Yeah, it does feel like a missed... For a character who's afraid of death, to not be inside their mind as they're dying... Like, why wouldn't you do that?
Big missed opportunity.
Yeah, it's like we don't get anything. Is he shocked? Is he surprised at this? Is he like focused? Is he panicking? Is he full of hate? Is he like, why have I done this? This is like, we don't get anything. You get like one look that doesn't really say anything, and then you just see him like, oh, I can see you trying to will yourself back to life. But the problem is that I'm killing you, so you can't save yourself. It's like, and it's like you didn't really think about this, did you? And it's like, what? Why can't we hear what Plagueis is thinking right now? It seemed like a massive mistake.
During the whole event, he's like giving like a revised version of his speech, so to say, talking about how everything he holds against Plagueis about becoming a messenger and all that. He brings up like a lot of like the stuff that happened. Like I mentioned this in I think part 2, how he brings up him choking him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he brings up a lot of little shit, like right before he kills him. Yeah, every single little thing.
And the thing I was saying,
he even talks about Naboo. It's like determined to suck the planet dry of plasma. It's like, you care?
Right. Which, I was gonna say. I know. Like, I mean, exactly. You actually care about that? Do you? I mean, like, what are you talking about? I mean, it. There's a line where he's talking about like all this is because of it's all my doing. It's like, is it though? It doesn't really feel like that to me. Again, because of the point you raised, Colin, it's held both perspectives for so long and so well throughout the entirety of the book. There's a few conversations where I could see that Palpatine might be pulling the strings there, but certainly not at every turn.
Yeah, and it's the whole ego thing. Like Palpatine, we've not had any plan for this. Like we've not seen him go, "Is this an opportunity? No, I'm going to hold off."
He didn't plan it.
He doesn't look. No, I know he didn't plan that moment.
Leave the room,
no, he didn't plan that
back,
moment.
said,
No, I know that. But I mean, we didn't have any
Yeah.
plans of like even like nothing that would imply he was going to kill Plagueis anytime soon. Like he was always reverent. It was still Reverend Palpatine, and we knew it was going to happen. We didn't get like the odd sentence every now and then. He was gauging Plagueis' reaction, but it wasn't like he was doing that to see if it was an opportunity or to see if there was any suspicion for a plan he already had in the works. He just switched. Like, oh, and I'm going to kill you. I'm going to unleash all of this like horrible hatred I have for you that I've apparently been building up forever. And we didn't get any of that. We saw none of the simmering of Sidious, specifically aimed at Plagueis anyway, which I felt was a bit odd.
You see little bits of it, but I don't
But not
say
to
none of it.
not to the degree that elicited this reaction.
We see suspicion and like fear and paranoia from him towards Plagueis, but we don't actually see any hatred towards him. Like until now, there's no reference to him like having any hatred for him. Well, at least not like.
No, but he chased under him a lot in part 2. Like he doesn't think that Plagueis is right to criticize him, and like late in here in part 3, he only grudgingly admits when Plagueis is right in his head now, instead of being like, "Oh, my master is totally right all the time." Like he's changed from when they first met.
Yeah, no, he's changed, but I'm saying we haven't physically seen the specific hatred he has towards him. We've seen like doubts, we've seen paranoia, we've seen criticisms.
But it's Palpatine though.
Yeah, I know. I don't feel
it's more him taking credit that I don't. Like I wanted to see some more explicit examples of how he manipulated everything. Apparently, like instead of him just claiming to, like right now.
Yeah, like I didn't have a problem with it not being set up because we know it's Palpatine. Of course, he's going to kill him. We know he's of course going to want to kill him. The ego thing, I didn't have a problem with. It was just the fact that we never got any build up to this specific scenario having played out in Sidious's head. Like we haven't seen him mulling this sort of looking for this opportunity over. It just happened, and like saying, "Oh, okay, now I guess I'll kill you." So it seemed weird for me. I don't know if that's the case for anyone else, but
oh no, yes,
I totally see where you're coming from. Yeah,
it didn't not make sense. I just feel like it was.
I just don't understand
the build up.
Yeah,
yeah.
We knew it was going to happen.
The thing
not
is
because we
that
obviously knew the story, but because we know Palpatine. But we just didn't see that side of him in this book.
I don't know that you needed to see it because that would project it too much to the point where you're really just going through the motion. I don't need him seething about his master in a previous scene, because it's good enough what he's doing now, where he's explaining, here's what you did a long time ago that pissed me off, here's something else you did not so long ago that pissed me off. I get that. That's okay. I don't need to see that in the moment. But it just seems like it would have been better for Plagueis to cut between the two perspectives. Like, what's Plagueis thinking? Because to me, if it's a tragedy, it's because Plagueis doesn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Explain like his reaction to what's happening. That's what I want to hear. There's none of that.
I wanted an emotional tug of war between the two characters and the two perspectives. Like have it be like very knife's edge, even in the situation. Knife's edge with Sidious prevailing. Like have it bounce between what initial attack, immediate reaction, like what the hell's going on, a response, and then overwhelming power and hatred. And then when he gets the edge, that's when he starts repositoring and expositioning and and then it comes back to the knife's edge point when he fights back, and then he gets finished off by like the alcohol is too much, the lightning's frying his the lungs, he can't regenerate, etc. Like just have it be more momentous than this situation was, because it was just like it was over. Like he had him dead to rights from the first bolt of lightning, and he then kept talking. It's like there was no. I mean, yeah, it works for the situation. That's what Palpatine would do, but it's just there was no thematic or emotional weight to that from our perspective.
Especially with it being a book about this person.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah,
we're not there with for his last moments.
Actually, one other thing that does occur to me though is the impression I have is just how similar this scene was to how Plagueis himself killed Tenebris, like in terms of the circumstances, in that it was a completely out of nowhere betrayal. It's like Plagueis' killing of Tenebris, there was no build up to it. It was just Plagueis taking advantage of a momentary opportunity, and that's kind of what Palpatine was doing here. And from that angle, I think it's appropriate, but the fact that Palpatine then just starts launching into this whole reasons you suck speech, that's the point where it starts to be a bit much. Whereas I think the scene might have played out just a little bit better if it was a bit more like, well, basically Plagueis' murder of Tenebris, where the two of them just kind of have a quick little dialogue, and then Tenebris dies.
But in that case, Plagueis spends the rest of the book sort of silently musing about why Tenebris sucked. So it's kind of the same thing to me. He just didn't say it to him as he was dying.
We needed an Assassin's Creed Temple of Death scene, which is spawning his corpse. So this is why you suck, kind of thing. Yeah, it was just missing something. I mean, especially even we can forgive everything else, but especially the whole Plagueis perspective. That was the big
Plagueis' perspective. That's the big one for me.
Yeah,
Definitely a missed opportunity.
In a way, I think that Plagueis' perspective in this scene would have actually been a lot more interesting, because the whole impression I get up to this point is that Plagueis had invested a huge amount of trust into Palpatine, and to a point probably loved Palpatine as a son. And suddenly just to have things turn around, it's like he's having to deal with the betrayal of a person he actually trusted, and is having to deal with his own impending death. And it's just like, what's going through this guy's head? And it's like listening to everything that Palpatine's saying as he's going. It's like,
Yeah, what's his response to each of those individual accusations, Like, he really thought he had a partnership, and that's what he wanted. He wanted, like, a partnership, the Sith to be a partnership, not just a rule of two. But, yeah, what is his response to each thing he's saying to him? Like, what is, like, especially because we've been with him this entire novel, like, and we're not there with it in his last moments. Like, we see it from the outside, but not inside, which I think, was definitely missed. Something that was it's really jarring, too. When you're, like, reading it, you would expect it. Like, after... Yeah. You have Palpatine doing
the way
this
it's
whole
written.
speech.
Yeah.
You would think, okay. So next paragraph we're gonna get like, okay, what plague? But then you're still seeing like we just see his face. It's like getting blue or whatever, and his eyes are bulging. It's like, wait, that's it. We're just like
we don't even get a surprised or a look of description or something. So there's nothing there.
Yeah, nothing that describes what's going on in his head at all. Just that he's dying, like just his asphyxiation, and that's it. And it's like, wow, okay, like it was kind of jarring. It was kind of jarring.
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to get just one perspective, you'd think we'd get Plagueis and miss out on Sidious, because one, we've got the Sidious intro at the very start of the book, which kind of does the job for you, and two, you've got the whole, the assassination of the Decanted Circle thing. It was jarring, like the scene was like there was no thematic switch, but it didn't need to be, because it's an assassination. The main character didn't expect it, so from his perspective, it was jarring. It was this moment that came out of nowhere, and it felt very real and immersive as a result. If the same thing happened with Sidious, like he's just like, oh, goodbye, Sidious, and he's just taking another sip from his wine or something and pondering, not even drunk, and then suddenly Sidious, as he's walking out the door, just immediately turns and snaps lightning on him. Like, well, what the hell? Suddenly you've got this, like, you've got the visceral reaction of the main character being your own reaction to the scene, because maybe the book's been alluding to it happening later, but not now, and then suddenly it's just full of lightning, flash, burn. He's like responding immediately, drawing on the Force. The whole perspective comes from his end, and he's like, why? He's trying to work out why is Sidious doing this right now. What's going on? Is there some sort of outside element? It's like what is happening right now? I feel that would have worked way better than just Sidious's. If you're not going to go for both perspectives at any rate.
And it would have been more satisfying of an ending too.
Oh yeah, because it would have been like fade to black and like, oh, what the, oh. And that would be it. Like, it would be a very, very poignant note to how the Sith operate. Like, this is you want to be a Sith. This is what it is, kind of thing. And it would be just a fade to black. That would be the end of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. I thought it would have had a much more powerful impact if that had been the end. Because again, you've got the end of the book at the start. You don't need to have the trail off to conclude everything, really, unless you want a specific epilogue, which we could still keep. It just seemed odd. Jarring.
Yeah. And then the epilogue is just post TPM stuff.
Yeah.
The recovery of Naboo, his election to chancellorship. They do reference that Hugo Damask's death was reported, but it was overshadowed by Palpatine's election, so it was just kind of shoved to the side. Yeah.
Oh, guys. I thought this might be a nice little point to mention this, because it was talked about how Hugo Damask's financial concerns were so intricate that they would probably take decades to unravel. But this kind of gave me an idea for kind of an anthology of short stories that could be tracing the history of the Rule of Two Sith Order. Basically, the idea is it's
That'd
kind
of cool.
following the investigations of some guy during the time frame of New Jedi Order who's investigating the Sith. So he starts investigating Palpatine and finds out about his association with Hugo Damask, finds about his association with Rugus Gnome, and just works his way back on through the line until he actually gets to Darth Bane.
That's one hell of a paper trail.
And every single time he makes a breakthrough, it segues into a short story concerning that specific Sith Lord. And then the very end of the the very end of the story, the last scene, would basically just have this guy being kidnapped by the one Sith under Darth Krayt, and all of his notes being stolen by them because they're looking for information on the history of other Sith Lords.
That would be a fantastic story to do. And you know who the best one to do it? James Luceno.
Yep.
Maybe.
Or me. Crazy enough.
Yeah, no, that would be his ultimate project. But yeah, but we'll never get it because
I wasn't sure if we mentioned this or not, but during the whole death thing, like I just want to, I mean, not to kiss his ass, but I don't really blame him too much for it because they said in the movie he killed him in his sleep. I just was expecting a more interesting idea because they mentioned from early on that Plagueis detested the need for sleep and later sort of kind of transcends the need for it. I thought they would just do something better with that, but as much as I complain about it, I'm not trying to pin it all on Luceno.
Oh, of course, yeah, he was working within very constraining limitations, but he also could have had the perspective side, so that's it's kind of just the initial jolt would have been like the first bit you had to get out of the way.
I almost feel like somebody said, okay, Plagueis is a little too awesome, Palpatine needs a lot of credit.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah,
because he lists everything like Dorvala, Yinchor, a clone army. It's like, really? Because he was kind of thinking about that before he met you. Like you came up with that?
He was meeting with the Kaminoans way before.
Yeah, so whatever, but it is what it is.
Something I want to bring up in the epilogue. First, a little side note that's just really silly. It doesn't matter, but there's a little short description for Obi-Wan saying that he already has a short beard, like after like a few weeks, and it made me wonder. I'm like, I wonder if there's a rule for Padawans. Oh no! I wonder if Padawans aren't like allowed to have any facial hair. Just as,
that is it because that's why
that's it, right? Okay. And then he's like, "Oh man, I gotta grow this thing out."
You're not allowed to, or you're not allowed, but it's not tradition to not express personal individualism until you're past that point. I thought that was always the thing. Anyway, that's what I took because that was why you had the braid.
You finally had the opportunity,
right? So he did it.
I thought you were going to say he was just honoring dead Qui-Gon by growing a beard too.
No, but yeah,
the beard and the mullet. The beard and the mullet.
The Jedi mullet. Top man.
The Jedi mullet.
The more interesting thing to me though is the stuff with Anakin and Obi-Wan, like how they're kind of suppressing Anakin. Like I think Palpatine asked about his mother, and he's like, I'm not allowed to talk about that. Like it's like, dang, they're already like boxing him into this thing, and I think that's in the Phantom Menace novelization. There's actually a very specific moment at the very end of the book. Yeah, okay, right here, where he says. But for now, when it mattered most, he felt alone. Like at the end of all of the Phantom Menace, and Qui-Gon was the only guy or any person in his life who was actually believing in him as a Jedi or anything like that. And then now he's dead. Now he's got to be an apprentice to this guy who kind of begrudgingly took him on and doesn't really want him. Like Qui-Gon believed in him. Obi-Wan doesn't really believe in him. And he has to deal with all of this. And then for like this last scene to come up, I thought was like an extremely like compelling thing just from like a small like Anakin thing, because I think Anakin's like psyche is like something very delicate and they don't really deal with it right all the time, and just to have just that little dialogue between was like,
I agree with you.
Boxing him into
I agree, but hang on, like just I do see the point of maybe not spreading around the word that like you're the product of like immaculate conception or whatever that.
Well, I don't think he knew that. Did we know if Anakin knows that he has no?
Well, I mean, his mother's very quick to reveal the information.
She's like, well, there is no dad.
That's what she says to Qui-Gon privately. They don't say that.
No, but it was said in the way that she wouldn't probably even have a problem with.
Yeah, so.
I never thought Anakin or Shmi would tell Anakin that.
Well, I mean, he never ever brings up the fact that I never knew my father, kind of thing. It's never brought up. So, like, I feel like it would have been told to him. And she's so forthcoming with the information that it doesn't seem like she would have kept it from him. Like she wasn't checking to see if Anakin was there or don't tell Anakin. But she's like, no, there was no father. As though it was just this thing that happens,
Yeah.
That's not common, Shmi.
What are you doing, Shmi? Yeah, but
I
do like
that
detail
I wanted.
Note for Anakin, not for the Jedi.
Because I thought it was more that Anakin couldn't speak about her because she's a slave, and like the Jedi weren't really doing anything about that. That's a big thing that happens in episode 2 where he's like, why
HR got in touch. You can't spread the fact that the Jedi aren't doing anything, Anakin. Come on. It's
like I don't know, it just felt kind of like like I kind of understand where Anakin was coming from in that moment. It's like, oh, they're not really. And then also Palpatine says that he's gonna like build up this boy like who's like ready for him basically. And I thought that was interesting, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. And the final lines are ripped straight from the movie, in a way.
Yep.
The great interest line.
Yep.
Watch his career.
Well,
regarding
Anakin's regarding the Jedi Order's handling of Anakin, I think this is another one of those instances where the Jedi Order's practice in this era of only ever training basically toddlers and indoctrinating them in the Jedi ways. This is another instance where that sort of approach kind of bites them in the ass. Because every single member of the Jedi Order is an indoctrinated member who's been a Jedi since before they can remember, they don't know what it's like to not have that indoctrination. They don't know how to relate to people on a level that doesn't incorporate Jedi discipline. It's like they can have sympathy for you, but they can't empathize because they have no way of possibly understanding that. And in a way, that's kind of why they end up mishandling Anakin. They don't know how to deal with that, so they deal with that the same way they deal with it in everyone else. They basically just tell them, forget about it. It's not worth considering.
It's another
when Yoda gives terrible advice in Revenge of the Sith. Arguably, they shouldn't be that blind to other people's feelings.
It's another one of those things that I hate because, I know I'm a big fan of the Jedi and I don't like negative things being written about them, but the only reason they ever went with that is because it was said in the films, and then they had to work with it. Like, if it wasn't said, too old, been training, then it wouldn't have been done. Like, all of the other writers and all the other stuff, they write them differently. They have exceptions. They have the Jedi clearly expressing intimate knowledge and empathy about the people around them, having no personal experience with the same setting. Like, little things like that, they just write and explore and breathe and make very real. But then these little things come back and it's like, oh, nope, they don't take anyone too young. Because it's like...
And that's one area where I really got to disagree with the way the Jedi Order was presented in the prequels, because George Lucas basically turned the Jedi Order into a cult. Whereas, that completely fucks everything up. The Jedi Order's organization, their recruiting system should be the exact opposite. Like, I kind of feel that they would only ever allow in, like, adults who are, like, 18 years old. Like, they treat it like joining the military. It's like you're only allowed to join the Order if you're a legal adult, and every single applicant is given a psychological exam to make sure that they're not, potential crazies. But the thing, they do the exact opposite. It's like training from being toddlers and not really screening any of their applicants because, it's like there's so many things that they could have prevented if they had just screened their applicants or given people a basic psychological exam. Like, give Attack of the Clones Anakin a psychological exam. Oh wait, this guy's a murderous sociopath. Shit.
To be angry is to be human. It's fine. But I don't have a problem with them taking on toddlers, like as a system. Remember, the parents are giving the kids away to a better life, but they should have also been taking on older people. It shouldn't have been just kids. That's why it's stupid.
The problem is there's no way to you can't control the weather. Like, you can't predict what somebody's going to do, whether you raise them in this system or not. Like, both Jedi and Sith are guilty of trying to control the future too much. This is just the way it manifests with the Jedi. One of the ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just never fit with the whole, the ways they look at things. Like, look at Yoda from Dark Rendezvous, like the quintessential Jedi, basically. And would you say that person is ever going to lack understanding and of basic morals and empathy with others, etc.? This is the guy that's teaching the toddlers, like from toddlerhood to young adult or to young child period. All Yoda, and is he not going to really instill these values? And let's not forget the mental aspects of being a Jedi Knight and a Padawan. It's very much basically parenthood, but with obviously more discipline in terms of the martial side. They're not unaware of the world around them, as everyone seems to make them out to be.
No, that would be ridiculous. I mean, it's a contradiction. Like, if that's the idea that they're supposed to be unaware, why are they mediating everything? It would just be stupid.
Yeah.
Which is why it's hard to write the Jedi. I get that, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like It just seems like surprisingly few people get it right for me.
And the people that do get it right make all of the people that get it wrong, including the films, but mostly, make them look completely ridiculous. Like, it doesn't work. So you have to kind of ignore aspects to go with the flow of the ones that do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason the Jedi Order is
often
completely
ridiculous.
different in terms of its foundation and principles than the prequels era, and that's because it was written before the prequels came out and tainted the whole view of the Jedi. Because, oh look, the film says this, therefore we must do this. And it develops down an entirely different route as a result. A lot more sensible route if you look at it.
But that was an
Luke's
intentional
imperfection and
thing from George Lucas to do. He wanted the Jedi to be this very different thing than what they are in the original trilogy. He wanted them to be in this scenario where they were in this like tied to this republic, and also like the way that they dealt with it. Like for instance, the stuff with the midichlorians is that they dealt with people by saying, "Hey, like let's just do this count and figure out who we can recruit," versus like dealing with just any old person. Like for instance, someone like Scout, someone that you're very interested in, I'm interested in, generally would not work in this kind of Jedi regime. And it's something that, or at least that's what Pablo Hidalgo has said, that it was intentional for George Lucas to make the Jedi in that way.
But the thing is, he could have done it in so many other ways. Like just tying them to the Republic immediately guarantees their downfall. Like, you didn't have to make anything else be bad about them. Like, just have that and have the flaws.
That's true. I mean, he
of the
could have,
system
but I mean, that was
bring
the choice he made, and it was intentional. It wasn't as if it was like.
No, I know. I'm
he
just saying it was like so many decisions Lucas has made. It was the wrong choice, is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
Because it doesn't flow with the ideas of the Jedi.
I feel like he often comes up with an idea that it's fine at its base, but he took it like in the wrong direction.
Agreed.
Like, this would be an example of that to me.
Agreed. He's an idea man, and he should give all of his ideas to other people, in my opinion, who know what they're doing. I don't have any hatred for him, but he does mess up a lot of things.
Well, you know.
I mean, look at the difference between Plagueis and the prequels. Prime example. Lucino is like a god of Star Wars, as far as I'm concerned. He knows his shit, and he makes more shit for us to know as a result. But
basically, Star Wars has really just come to the point where there's so much material and there's so much world building that what it really needs in charge, what it needs from the guy in charge of the franchise, is basically a Tolkien. James Lucino is a Tolkien. Like, he's brilliant with the world building side of things. George Lucas really isn't.
yeah, he's an idea man. He's the initial concept guy. You don't go and build something off concept art, or rather, you don't make something from concept art. You build on top of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Plagueis.
Edit this out if I'm totally wrong, but are we doing the game this episode, or is...
Don't tempt people. Don't tempt me, Matt. No, we
I
have
just
no time.
had no
Apologies.
idea.
It is 1 o'clock.
We got no time.
Sorry, guys. We'll be doing the game thing tournament next episode, which will be coming out soon. And the one previous to this one will be coming out almost immediately before this one, because it's very late, because that's my fault. Sorry. But
Yeah.
we get
Well,
back
one
to
thing we do have to mention,
consistent
though,
stuff.
for polling for the next Legends Archive, we're going to be doing a comic book run next time. So you guys will see a poll on the video right now. It should be popping up in the top right corner, I believe. The choices are Legacy, Quinlan Voss, Jedi in Darkness, Dawn of the Jedi, Knights of the Old Republic, and Tales of the Jedi. So you guys just poll there, vote which one you guys want us to
trilogy, I
next,
thought.
And no, not the books. We're doing the comics.
Comics, sorry.
Well, so you guys are going to vote on that, and then that's the next one we're going to do. After that, as Callan has spoiled for you guys, we're going to be doing the trilogy. And then,
Come on, man.
And then after that, we're going to be doing the micro series, the original Clone Wars micro series.
Yes!
Looking forward to both, especially Thrawn. It's been a while since I've touched the Thrawn trilogy. So, that brings us to a close. Another episode of the Council Forcecast, episode 24.
Final thoughts on Darth Plagueis before we leave?
Sure.
Well, if you couldn't tell already, we like the book.
Yes.
A lot. We love
amazing.
the book. It's like this book is the reason why the expanded universe is a good thing. This book is the reason why we defend the expanded universe to our dying breath, despite the crimes perpetrated by Disney.
Well, the story group. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's the only flaw that, as far as I'm concerned, is it's not for the uninitiative, and that's hardly a flaw. It's the quintessential example of everything good about the EU, with good storytelling, good character development, masterful character development. It's fantastic, and everyone who is a Star Wars fan should read it. But just don't go into it without a pre-existing knowledge. It's not the first one on. It shouldn't be the first one on your list.
Familiarize yourself with a lot of stories first, get the feel of what the expanded universe is and the stories in it. Then go into this, you'll understand a lot better.
I mean, arguably, it should be the very last thing you ever read, because it is like the culmination.
There's an argument for that, I think. That's solid.
Yeah,
quite possibly.
I mean, you don't have to restrict yourself to
Of course not, no, but it would be recommendation. If you had a recommended viewing order, it would definitely not be anywhere near the front of the list.
Someone should really make like a spy. Every little thing this thing like connects to in some way, shape, or form.
I'm sure somebody has.
Yeah, someone definitely has. But yeah, so Antoine, what did you think?
Like a required reading list for it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not my favorite book to read necessarily. Like, I feel like it's good for like a greatest hits of Star Wars, but there's other stories that I've read in Star Wars that have moved me more at the end of the day. Like, I feel like this is just not just an information dump. It's more than that. But for me,
definitely not an action piece. That's for sure.
Not even so much action, because I don't really care so much for the action-packed Star Wars stuff, but more of the introspective stuff. I prefer like Dark Rendezvous and Shatterpoint to this. I think because there's a lot of
character study. A lot of
character study and character conflict. I mean, there's character conflict here as well and development and all that. But I always like seeing two ideologies like going at it, and then having a character because that's not the right way of saying it, because I'm saying things that I like.
The book is a cerebral experience rather than like a visceral, not thrilling one, but conflict one.
I'm not after reading it. I don't feel like I've gone through like an emotional
upheaval,
not emotional turmoil, but like an emotional episode of like, oh yeah, like I had a catharsis at the end of the day. But it's more of like I feel like that was really good telling of all the other little Star Wars stories that I've seen before in a more like analytical way than it is something from the heart in that way.
It's perspective from the Sith, basically. It's the cerebral experience.
Yeah.
My favorite, two of my favorite books are The Revenge of the Sith novelization and Shatterpoint, both written by Matthew Stover. And I've said many times, to me, he understands hearts and minds, and Lucina knows how to build a world better than anyone. And so I'm not as moved by this book as other books either. I just appreciate it and love it for its value. And it's a very artful information dump, but it is kind of an information dump. I don't think that's really a negative.
Yeah, it's not.
What I really, one thing that makes me super, super sad is that we never got the opportunity for James Lucino and Matt Stover to collaborate on a book before be Disney nixed the EU.
That would be beautiful.
Well, the whole Dark Lord trilogy was basically that.
Kinda. It's
less
the
cohesive.
Dark Lord trilogy is one. It's one of those things that was kind of made into a trilogy after the fact, but wasn't really intended to be one. It works, but
I don't agree. But okay.
For me, the Dark Rendezvous was the greatest Star Wars book I've ever read. In terms of my personal enjoyment of it, not how I think it's the greatest, although it definitely is one of the greatest. For the whole blend of cerebral, emotional, character, plot, everything going together in a different blend, it was beautiful. Plus, the best portrayal of Yoda of anything ever. So that ranks higher than this for me in personal enjoyment. But this is an entirely different league, like not in quality, but just purpose. Like, this book is not supposed to be a emotionally investing thriller of an action or adventure flick. It's just it's a cerebral experience contemplating the ways of the Sith and the characters involved. And again, it's Plagueis. This is Plagueis. He's not one that you're going to tend to be emotionally invested in. Neither is Sidious as well. So it's so artfully done, but it is still an information dump, as Matt says. So again, just don't put it on first on the list. Don't come to this, see it for think it's quite dry and think this is the EU. It's just all information. No, that's not how it works.
No, that's Cloak of Deception.
That's Cloak of Deception.
Yeah.
That's the driest book in the EU.
Yeah, you can avoid that if you want. It's all good.
I could feel the paper of that book sucking the moisture out of my fingertips. That's how dry it was.
There are definitely many, many EU material pieces you should either go into warily or avoid altogether. It is not flawless. Many, many problems with it. But yeah, we're going to be going through in the next few weeks, months, maybe years, I don't know, being optimistic. We're going to be going through all the different Legends material stuff that you should look and you should check out, starting with whatever you vote for next time, flashing up the thing now, provided Future Calendar edits the video properly. So vote on that poll, and that will decide what we do next. The comic next. The next one will be the book. Sorry, guys, I forgot that. But with that, has anyone else got anything else to say? Or are we all done? We're all done. Okay, so I'm ready for, and I still don't have an outro.
I
may just make that my outro, to be honest.
Evanova 95, we hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Great Jedi 91, same thing. See you guys later.
This is Antoine. Peace, love. May the Force be with you always.
Goodbye.